Brings us to the Opposition Day motion on youth unemployment. I inform the House that the Speaker has selected the amendment tabled in the name of the Prime Minister. I call the Shadow Secretary of State, Helen Whately, to move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This afternoon we're here to talk about young people. Young people who wake up every morning with nowhere to go. No classroom, no workplace, no sense that today will be different from yesterday. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's part of our job to put ourselves in other people's shoes. Today, the shoes of a young man or woman who's just left school, college or university, setting out on real life into the world of work. It should be a moment of liberation, trepidation and excitement, because the world is at your feet. But right now, for hundreds and thousands of young people, it's not. Just a few days ago, I was with a constituent who's just finished school. She's great. She's got GCSEs and A-levels, she's done work experience, she's charming and presentable. She's been applying for jobs day after day, but can she get one? Not a squeak. And this in the bustling, vibrant economy of the south-east of England. She told me it can be lonely being stuck at home all day applying for jobs, but she's not alone. She's in the company of many thousands of young people. Over 700,000 young people are unemployed. That's more than the entire population of a city like Sheffield, and it's getting worse. Our youth unemployment rate is rising faster than any other G7 country. Nearly 1 million young people are not in education, employment or training, and over 700,000 university graduates are on out-of-work benefits. These aren't just statistics, they are lives knocked off course. Young women and men putting in hundreds of job applications and getting hundreds of rejections, getting knocked back again and again, signing on to benefits because they see no other way, missing out on the chance to have money in their pocket they've earned themselves, missing out on the first step towards independence, missing out on the experience you gain in your early years in work on which your future working life will build. Forget saving to buy a first car or a first home. Dreams and ambitions shot to pieces, becoming Britain's lost generation. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way, and I have a lot of sympathy for the situation she's describing. Could I ask her, the number of people who are NEET is very high, but it actually started in 2021, when the Honourable Lady's party was in government. Could I ask, why didn't her party do something about it? Because the election wasn't until 2 years ago. So what happened to that policy?
I'll say to the Honourable Lady, and I'm glad she has some sympathy with the position of young people who are struggling to get jobs, that my party halved unemployment. Her party's record is unemployment going up, and since her party has been in power, unemployment has gone up every single month. So, what is going on? What's going on is them, the Labour government, same old Labour. In they come, up go taxes and up goes unemployment every single time. They put taxes up by £36 billion in their first budget. And not just any old taxes. Their national insurance hike was specifically a tax on employment, literally a jobs tax. If you tax it, you will get less of it. It's not rocket science. It's basic economics. Then we have... I'm
grateful to my right honourable friend. Is she aware that UK hospitality has said that we could be seeing the death of the great British summer job, and that even Labour's own Alan Milburn has warned that there's a long-standing decline in 16 and 17-year-olds getting Saturday jobs? Previous Labour governments have always shoved up youth unemployment, but never before have they threatened to destroy the great British summer job, and that is much to be regretted, and it's about time they turned around their policies instead of bringing in not only the jobs tax but the employment rights bill as well.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. Summer jobs, holiday jobs, these are really important ways for young people to get experience before they leave education to try and get a full-time job. But we've seen a shocking decline in young people being able to get those jobs and in the availability of those jobs. And the cost of employment and regulation due to this government is exactly the problem here. I want to make some progress. I will take more interventions, though. And I'm coming to exactly this point about regulation and red tape, because we then have the Employment Rights Bill, which is making it harder for businesses to employ people. Labour say they want to achieve growth, yet their policies are so obviously going to achieve the exact opposite. And the problem is, they don't understand business. Have they any idea how hard it is to break even, let alone make a profit? Any idea how hard it is to bring in enough to cover your payroll each month? Never mind pay yourself if you started a business. Any idea how hard it is to make your staff redundant because you can't afford to keep paying them? Of course they don't. Because how many of their front bench has worked in a business, and I'm not counting union officials, let alone run one? I'm happy to give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way, and as in my previous career advising businesses up and down the country, I do take some issue with her point that there's no experience. I wonder, she says about the fact that taxes, and particularly national insurance rises, are causing the rise in youth unemployment. I wonder at what level of income do young people, specifically under 21, start attracting national insurance contributions?
I'm perfectly well aware of the policy on national insurance, but if he and I take his point, that there are some Labour MPs who have got business experience, but if anyone looks at the front bench and the cabinet in particular, that is few and far between. And if he's been talking to businesses, as he clearly knows some, he will hear from businesses who have said directly to me and so many of us here that it is their policies which are making it so hard and so expensive to employ people, particularly young people. And to that point, even for members of the government who don't have business experience, they could and indeed should listen to what businesses have been telling them. For instance, Labour's 2024 budget did unthinkable damage to our sector. That's Kate Nichols of UK Hospitality, backed up by her colleague Alan Simpson, who said recently that if the government continue their approach, we will only see job losses and business closures accelerate. That's a sector that shed over 100,000 jobs under this government. And Jane Grattan from the British Chambers of Commerce, who said Labour's policies are deeply worrying for employers. They will increase employment cost complexity and risk for firms, particularly SMEs, followed by government needs to help, not hinder businesses. And that is the crux of it. Labour see businesses as a cash cow, not the engine of the economy. And people, young people especially, are the ones suffering as a result. Because before businesses start letting people go, they generally stop hiring, and that is what they're doing. And when they stop hiring, who gets hit hardest? Young people. And by hitting hospitality, all those pubs and cafes where people get their first jobs, they're hitting young people again. The simple fact is there are fewer jobs for young people under this government. This unemployment disaster for young people isn't something that's just happened on Labour's watch. It is a disaster of their making. And I'll give way to my right.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way, because she makes this point so well. In my constituency, in the Walsall Borough, it's really deeply worrying that youth unemployment is higher than the national average, because the truth is that youth unemployment has skyrocketed under Labour's watch. So does she agree with me? The big part of the problem here is we have a Labour government that does not understand that the more that you squeeze business, you absolutely squeeze job opportunities for young people.
My right honourable friend makes the point so clearly. It is so obvious to us as the party of business that if you keep taxing business, there will be fewer jobs, but they just don't seem to get it. However, Labour do know they are in trouble. That's why they're talking up their youth programmes and youth hubs and the youth guarantee. But most of those things... Wait, you laugh. No, listen. Most of those things, he says, the honourable gentleman there says it's our programme. Exactly that. Most of those things are just rebrands of programmes already going on that we started. We started youth hubs. Changing the name of the youth offer to youth guarantee doesn't solve the problem. Of course, there's a part for training programmes and work placements to play in helping people bridge the gap between school and work. But government programmes isn't the answer to the fundamental problem. Young people want jobs, and this government is killing jobs. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
I do thank the Shadow Minister for giving way. She is obviously well known for speaking quite clearly and candidly, and I do think that's refreshing. So I wonder if she can clearly and candidly answer this. Which are the rights that she thinks young people should be denied in order to get into work, and by how much would she cut the minimum wage to facilitate those young people back into work? Because, unfortunately, she can't have it both ways. She's just made a point that these are hindering on business, so what would she be doing to cut them, and would she make that clear commitment at the dispatch box?
Helen Whately.
I enjoy the honourable gentleman's leading into his question with a bit of flattery, so I thank him very much for that, but I'm not going to be drawn into his attempt for me to talk about the minimum wage and things that he's asking me to go down, much though he might love me too. What I will do, however, is talk about our record in government. Because we halved unemployment. We got record numbers of people into work. We backed businesses to create 800 jobs for every day we were in government. We reformed welfare to make work pay. We brought down the benefits bill. None of these things is on the cards under this Labour government. They're crushing businesses with taxes and red tape. They're destroying jobs. They're driving up unemployment. They U-turned on welfare savings and put up taxes by £26 billion on working people at the last budget to pay for that ballooning benefits bill. I'm not going to argue that we got everything right. Some of the graduates struggling to get jobs have got degrees that aren't actually any help to them, and they took those degrees when we were in government. And under us, through the pandemic and after, the number of young people dropping out of work and onto benefits because of mental health went up too. We wanted to end the stigma of mental illness, but the consequences have been far-reaching. Our welfare system wasn't designed to support people with milder mental health problems or milder neurodiversity, nor for a time when a quarter of people report themselves disabled. The system isn't working. Instead, it's funneling people off work and onto benefits. And now, with the government's failure to reform welfare, young people are stuck in a benefits trap, better off on benefits and fearful of losing them if they get a job. Add to that the stress and misery of trying and failing again and again to get a job because their jobs are fewer and further between. Most young people I've spoken to don't want to be on benefits, but that's where they are ending up. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Does she at least then, for those people, welcome the job guarantee for 18 to 21-year-olds? And does she think that represents this government working with employers to create opportunities like the Premier League and FA? And is that not in stark contrast to her government who watched opportunity disappear while they did FA?
Yeah.
So if the honourable gentleman was listening, I said there's a place for programmes that support young people into work, particularly if they find they don't have the skills that are needed to do the jobs in their area. We in government had programmes like that. Those programmes being continued under this government. But there's a fundamental problem with the idea and part of the concept of the youth guarantee, which has wobbled a bit at different announcements and different times. But the idea that the government's trying to guarantee somebody a job, when actually the problem with what this government is doing is it's destroying the jobs that businesses are creating. The right way to solve this problem is to back businesses to create jobs, not some kind of socialist, communist, even Marxist approach to creating a job with taxpayers' money so somebody is in work. Madam Deputy Speaker, the situation is looking pretty bleak. It's a disaster for a generation of young people and our economy. But it doesn't have to be like this. Even in a world of AI, there is another way. It starts with backing businesses, because they are the ones who create jobs. Cutting taxes, cutting red tape, scrapping the swathes of regulation that stop businesses giving young people a summer job or a Saturday shift. Getting government out of the way so young people can get on. I welcome the government's U-turn on probation periods, a policy that many businesses told me would deter them from taking a chance on a young person. And I actually welcome the government's latest U-turn, how many are we on? Is it 13? On business rates for pubs. But what about the rest of hospitality? Why not adopt our policy and scrap business rates not just for pubs, but for high street shops too? And I say to the Minister, don't just send young people off on more training courses or work experience schemes. What young people want now is jobs. And why not adopt our policy to double apprenticeships and end debt-trap degrees too? We don't have to have a lost generation, but we need a government which will make different choices. Back businesses to create jobs, scrap degrees that don't pay back, and reform welfare so it pays to work. Help this generation make their way in life and get our country working again.
The question is as on the order paper. I call the Minister to move the amendment. Diana Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I beg to move the amendment standing in the name of my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister. Madam Deputy Speaker, in the North, I think we would say that the Honourable Lady has some brass neck to make the speech that she's just delivered to this House. And as an MP that has been in the House for some time, I think it might be helpful to us all if I just remind the Honourable Lady about her party's record over the past 14 years. Her party is the one that fumbled the handling of the pandemic, setting back a whole generation of kids, that failed to deal with the growing mental health crisis amongst young people, that left school buildings to crumble, and that decimated youth centres. And let's just look at the specific facts of youth employment. First of all, under the last Conservative government, the number of young people not in education, employment or training grew by 45% in just 3 years. Scarily, that left almost 1 million young people, 1 in 8, on the sidelines when they were chucked out of office. And by what time, I'm just going to complete this, I'm just going to complete the Conservatives' record, because I think it would be beneficial for us all to hear this. And by which time youth unemployment, this is when the Conservatives were chucked out, youth unemployment rate was at 13%, compared to just over 9% 2 years earlier. And the number of young people economically inactive due to long-term sickness had more than doubled in 5 years to over 250,000 on their watch. They also failed as well to support young people in the face of the changing retail sector, for example, where many start their careers. I certainly started with a Saturday job, but where jobs have fallen, job opportunities have fallen since 2017 as new technology changes how people shop and how shops employ people. They took no action on that. So the Conservative legacy for young people looks pretty dismal from virtually every angle. I will give way to my near neighbour.
My neighbour for giving way, and she is always a fair and credible person in my experience. So can she just confirm that youth unemployment reduced over the 14 years the Conservatives, rather than taking some selective period over COVID in order to give an entirely partisan and biased view of the statistics? The numbers went down, didn't they? The only government that put up youth unemployment by 45% was the last Labour one.
Minister.
The honourable gentleman, who is a close neighbour in Hull, in East Yorkshire, he says about being partial and only giving part of the picture. I've just been setting out, I think, a very full explanation of 14 years of the Conservatives and what they delivered for young people. Now, let me just expand on this a little bit, because they're now talking about the need to expand apprenticeships, for example. But under their watch, under the 14 years, there was a collapse. There was a collapse in youth apprenticeships. Starts were down by almost 40% under the Conservative government over the last decade, leaving us, this Labour government, to reverse that decline. Now, they also have been critical of the welfare system for trapping people out of work. They seem to have forgotten the fact that they presided over it for 14 years. It was their system that they introduced. And it's now been left to us to address the disincentive to work that they built into the system, and a task that we started to deal with in the Universal Credit Act last year. So put simply, no, I'm going to make some progress. So put simply, they cut off opportunity for young people, they wrote them off, and then they blamed them for the position that they were in. But on this side of the House, we know that young people are this country's future and that their success is Britain's success. And we are not prepared to sit on our hands and let all that talent and potential go unused. That's not good enough for those young people, and it's not good enough for this country, which needs the contribution that they can offer more than ever, not just now, but for the next 40 years. No, I'm not going to give way. I'm going to make some progress. So we are investing in young people to turn around this dire legacy that the party opposite left behind. We're actually supporting young people so they can fulfil their potential and breaking the cycle of wasted talent cascading down generations. And let's be clear, we are starting already to see some signs of progress. We've got record levels of employment. Youth employment is up by 153,000 in the last year. But the scale of the crisis brewed up by the party opposite requires much more than that. The number of young people neither learning nor earning is equivalent to 3 cities the size of Hull. So we know there is more to do. I will later on, but I want to get this on the record. We know that if someone falls out of the workforce when they are young, I think it might be really helpful if the Conservative MPs who are chuntering from a sedentary position might just want to listen to this, because this is about the future of our country. We know that if someone falls out of the workforce when they are young, they can lose out on £1 million in earnings, and it costs the state a similar amount to support them. But if we can make sure that they get the right opportunities and support early on, we can change their life stories for the better. That's why we're helping more young people into work, and that's why it's a priority for us in the DWP. Yes, I'm happy to give way.
Jim Dixon.
Can I thank the Minister for giving way? In my constituency of Dartford and across Kent, we are pleased to be one of the trailblazer areas for the Connect to Work programme, a programme started under this government, not under the last government. That gives people personalised support to stay in work and to get jobs in the first place and ensure that people have a long-term future in the workplace. Is this not, perhaps the Minister can tell us, is this not the sort of serious intervention we need in order to deal with unemployment amongst young people?
And my honourable friend is exactly right. That is the kind of initiative that will help deliver for these young people who are currently out of work, particularly with health problems, health conditions and disabilities. Now, I just want to say, when we're talking about young people, I think all of us in the House will recognise how disheartening it can be when you're looking for work and you can't find that opportunity, and you may not have the confidence to know and to apply for the jobs that are out there. If you put yourself in the shoes of an 18-year-old who's perhaps lost their way a little bit, doesn't have the confidence, it's difficult for them perhaps to go into a job centre to find out what opportunities are available. And that's why, as part of the Youth Guarantee, we are expanding the DWP Youth Hubs, located in places like football clubs and other sports facilities, to more than 350 areas across Great Britain. And I accept that youth hubs were part of the previous government's plans around dealing with youth unemployment, but they were very small in number. We're expanding them to 350. Now, these are helping people like Erin, a young woman who was unemployed for 2 years and struggling with her motivation, but who, after visiting a youth hub based at Crystal Palace Football Club, was able to complete a work placement before being offered a permanent job. That came off the back of joining a hospitality programme, which gave her valuable experience and confidence, and it it goes to show what young people can achieve when they are motivated, confident and have that self-belief. And that's why the expansion of youth hubs forms just one part of our wider, I'm just going to finish this part, one part of our wider youth guarantee. And this guarantee is designed to make sure that no young person is left behind. I will give way to the Right Honourable Gentleman.
I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Lady. In East Kent there's a company called Hats, which runs coffee bars, and the proprietor philanthropically employs hard-to-employ young people. Over 25 outlets in the last 12 months for which figures are available. The profit on all 25 outlets was £12 as a direct result of this government's policies. The young people are losing out on the opportunities that she is currently talking about.
Well, I will come on to talk a little bit about some of the accusations that are being levelled at this government in terms of national insurance contributions. So I'll deal with that point later in my speech, if I may. But I just want to say, with the youth hubs, they will be offering a helping hand, whether it's writing a CV or whether it's actually getting a work placement to actually put on a CV. We've announced that over the next 3 years, we're investing £820 million to support almost 900,000 young people on universal credit and looking for work. And this will include new dedicated work support sessions followed by intensive tailored help to help them secure the right job, training or learning opportunity. And we're backing this up by funding around 300,000 more opportunities to gain work experience and training in sectors like construction and hospitality. Yes, I'm very happy.
I want to thank my right honourable friend for her great explanation of youth hubs. We've just opened one at the Peterborough United Posh Stadium, bringing together all sorts of partnerships. Some of the young people I speak to there raise a number of issues that the Youth Hub addresses. One which is part of the opposition record they've not talked about, which is the absolute decimation of career services and in-work support in schools to give young people advice and support. The opposition talked a lot about apprentices, talked a lot about undergraduates. They did not talk about level 2 and level 3 and the kind of engine room apprentices that we need, and the Youth Hub will start getting us back in Peterborough.
And I thank my honourable friend for that contribution. He makes that point very well indeed. Just going back to the youth guarantee, I want to make it clear as well that there will be guaranteed jobs for around 55,000 individuals over the course of the 3 years. And we already have companies who have shown an interest in taking on these employees from E.ON, JD Sports, Tesco and TUI, and are really grateful for the offers that they're making. Now, we know on this side of the House that we've tackled these challenges before with the New Deal for Young People under the last Labour government, and we're going to do it again now. And alongside the youth guarantee, I will very briefly.
Thank you. Along with the youth hubs, the youth guarantee, there's also £725 million investment into apprenticeships, and along with the new technical excellence college status for Exeter College, they're becoming one of the biggest providers of apprenticeships in this country. Does the Minister agree with me that this stands in stark contrast to the 50% increase in youth unemployment of the last government?
Minister, and again, my honourable friend makes his case very well there and makes that point. I just want to also say that we've just been hearing about the £725 million for the growth and skills levy as part of the £1.5 billion that's been made available for employment and skills support at the budget. This is really very much needed, and the dramatic decline in young people starting apprenticeships under the previous government, we are going to reverse that. And at the same time, we are strengthening world-leading universities. I'm going to make some progress because I know there are lots of backbenchers who want to speak. With the Skills White Paper setting out our plan to build a more specialised and more efficient higher education sector, which will build and better meet the needs of our economy. Because we want to build on the fact that the graduate economic inactivity rate is now at its lowest on record. And we recognise the need for modern technical skills, as we've been hearing, and not just the old academic subjects. And I saw this for myself at the Ron Deering University Technical College in Hull only last week, with young people honing their skills and getting a brilliant education. Now, no matter what path young people choose, we want them to have the skills to succeed. Skills are vital in the world of work today, and over a quarter of all vacancies are skill shortage teach vacancies. And that's why the Prime Minister set out last year our bold ambition for 2/3 of young people to enter higher level education or training. We've added adult skills to the DWP brief to help us join up employment support and skills more closely so that young people have genuine pathways into good jobs. We're significantly expanding sector-based work academy programmes, SWAPs, in England and Scotland, with over 145,000 additional places over the next 3 years. And just today, our colleagues at DSIT have announced a new package to give people the skills to seize the opportunities that AI will bring. This includes an expansion of free AI foundation training for all workers to upskill 10 million people by 2030. All of this is about opening up opportunities for young people. But we want to make sure that no stone is left unturned. So last month, the government unveiled our National Youth Strategy backed by £500 million to rebuild the youth services that the party opposite decimated and to help more young people transition to adulthood. And the Secretary of State has commissioned Alan Milburn to complete a wide-ranging investigation into the causes of youth inactivity and to come up with policy solutions across the piece. And as a former Health Secretary, he is well placed to give particular focus to the role of health in all of this. And this is needed because over a quarter of NEET young people now cite long-term sickness or disability as a barrier. That's more than double what it was in 2013-14. Too many people are shut out of the labour market by disability or ill health, and this has worsened, especially since COVID. So we're rolling out a £1 billion Pathways to Work offer, which brings together programmes like Connect to Work, which my honourable friend referred to, which I've seen in action in Lewisham, where I met a neurodiverse young man who told me how the personalised support he was receiving from the team was helping him to stay in work. And like Workwell, which is providing really impressive integrated work and health support. And I had a chance to see that in Cambridge recently. Pathways to Work will ultimately guarantee access to work, health and skills support for disabled people and those with long-term health conditions who are claiming out-of-work benefits. And we already have 1,000 Pathways to Work advisors on hand to provide that better one-to-one support. We also know that prevention is better than cure. So wherever possible, we want to avoid people falling out of work due to ill health in the first place. And employers have a unique role to play here. This will be my final giving way.
I thank the honourable lady, my honourable friend, for giving way. I just want to outline really whether she would agree with me that it is easy to try and have this kind of debate about who's getting it right, who's getting it wrong. Fundamentally, this requires a systemic shift in how we look at the problem, that it is generational and intergenerational, and everything that the Honourable Lady is outlining is showing how we are taking that systemic view to really get to the heart of the cause of these problems and finally move forward for the generations that have been let down because we haven't had that approach from the government.
Very wise words from my honourable friend. And I do just want to say something about employers because they have a vital role to play in all of this. And in terms of keeping people in work when they develop illness or disability, we are really pleased that we're working with over 100 vanguard employers to take forward Sir Charlie Mayfield's recommendations from his Keep Britain Working Review, helping to create a picture of what best practice looks like when it comes to building healthy and inclusive workplaces. And we've had an outstanding response from businesses because they know that when their workers win, they win too. And contrary to what some would say and believe, the interests of employees and employers are not diametrically opposed. Everybody wins when workers are secure, happy and healthy. And that leads me on to the Employment Rights Act, which includes reforms like the extension of statutory sick pay, so more people can take the time they need to recover instead of risking longer-term absences. This is not just good for workers, it's good for businesses too. And I just want to address this issue around national insurance contributions and business rates. Let's be clear, employers generally don't have to pay any employer national insurance contributions for employees under the age of 21 or under 25 if they're an apprentice. And just yesterday, in terms of business rates, we announced every pub and live music venue will get 15% off its new business rates bill on top of the support announced at budget. And then bills will be frozen in real terms for a further 2 years. This government will always support businesses businesses, giving them the stability that they need to grow and create good jobs. Before I finish, there's one other thing I want to talk about. Just as what happens at the start of your working life can have many consequences for your future, the same is true about what happens in our childhood. When a young person ends up out of work or training, it's no use pretending that's suddenly come about in a bubble. We know that if you grow up poor, you're less likely to do well at school and more likely to be a NEET. Poverty, low attainment and low aspiration can not only waste the potential of a young life, it can then cascade on to the next generation. Shockingly, the party opposite presided over a 900,000 increase in the number of children in poverty. Shameful. Shameful. And now they come to this House questioning why a generation is struggling. We are very proud to be lifting the 2-child limit, with all the benefits that will bring for hundreds of thousands of children who will be less likely to experience mental health issues, less likely to be unemployed and more likely to be in work and earning more. And yet the party opposite opposes it. As ever, they seem determined to pull the rug from the next generation. And doesn't that sum them up? They blame, we support, they complain, we fix, they cut, we build. We will never forget the neglect that left our young people without the hope and opportunity every generation deserves. But this government is doing things differently. We are laying the foundations for young people to succeed, giving them the opportunities they need and the skills and support to seize them. These opportunities are, of course, accompanied by obligations to take them up. But this is so much better than a life that's just written off. And breaking down barriers to opportunity so every young person can fulfil their potential in all parts of our United Kingdom.
The original question was as on the order paper, since when an amendment has been proposed as on the order paper. The question is that the original words stand part of the question. I call the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Sarah Olney.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Youth unemployment has risen since Labour took power. The rate is now above 15%. That's more than 1 in 7 18 to 24-year-olds who are not in employment. This is a really troubling statistic, but it has its roots in the Conservatives' dismal economic record. The economic challenges we face didn't develop overnight. The previous government's economic chaos and mismanagement damaged jobs and young people's employment prospects. The Conservative Party failed to invest in skills and workforce planning, which is contributing towards the shortage of quality entry-level jobs which are available to people leaving college or university today. Young people are increasingly... Yes.
I thank her for giving way. I read the opposition's motion very carefully, which is on a hugely important issue, but I'm rather concerned to see that transport is not mentioned once. This is a massive barrier to employment and training for young people in North Norfolk, but the Conservatives don't seem to realise it's an issue. Does she agree with me that poor rural public transport is trapping young people in my area in unemployment, and the Conservatives should apologise to those young people for the state they left it in?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for that point, and he is right. Young people today face so many barriers in terms of being able to access both education and employment, and this is very much a legacy of the last Conservative government and their mismanagement. Young people are increasingly concerned as the links between education and employment have become weaker and weaker. In years past, if you went to... Yes, happy to.
Thank you very much. Would my honourable friend agree that the Conservatives, under the Conservatives, career advice in schools was absolutely decimated and hollowed out, pushing young people to the margins? And on top of that, instead of being able to do the gold standard apprenticeships that my dad and my brother did, these were also neglected by the Conservatives for more academic routes.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for that intervention. She's absolutely right about apprenticeships. I'll be saying more about that in due course. In years past, if you went to university and attained a good degree, you could reasonably expect an entry-level job in the field you wanted to work in. But now the experience for so many young people is that they enter a job market which is not open to hiring inexperienced people, with employers being less willing or able to take a risk and train individuals out of university. I spoke with business students from Roehampton University earlier this month who explained to me their fears that they would be unable to work in the field of their choosing. One student told me he'd even seen an advertisement for a volunteering position which required 3 years of experience. The job market is so crowded and competitive that the reality for more and more graduates is that they must return to living with their parents after university without having serious prospects of being able to gain even an entry-level job. And these students... Yeah.
I'm very grateful to her giving way. Does she also share my concern then for the graduate market when we talk about youth unemployment? Because we know from the ONS that 257,000 Brits emigrated, of which 70% were under the age of 35. So we're actually losing a lot of talent that isn't even picked up in the figures. So it's likely that because of the government's changes, we're actually seeing significant worse youth unemployment that isn't picked up in the figures.
Sarah Olney.
I thank the honourable gentleman for that remark. I think one of my big concerns is that for our economy we aren't getting that pipeline of young people into those entry-level jobs, and that really threatens our future sustainability and future growth, as well as imperiling the prospects of those young people who aren't able to gain a role. These students also remarked to me about their concerns for artificial intelligence and replacing many professional level jobs, making the skills they're learning now surplus to requirements for many employers. And as the government looks to promote public sector efficiency through using AI, many young people are worried that that means even fewer jobs for them. So while we should continue... Yes, happy to.
Madam Speaker, always trying to be constructive in relation to my interventions and comments. In Northern Ireland, we have youth employment at 7.3%. I think it's 15.4% here, almost half. And what I would, the Honourable Lady, if she's happy to do so, does she agree that perhaps maybe looking at the success stories that there are in this United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, where youth employment has reduced so much, we focused in Northern Ireland upon those young Protestant males, those from 12 to 18, those who couldn't get jobs, and we reduced that number. If we can do that in Northern Ireland, I'm quite sure we could do the same here in the mainland. Does the Honourable Lady agree that should be looked at?
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman who always makes constructive interventions, and I thank him for that. And he's absolutely right. We need to look at what works. We need to look at and we really do need to focus on this issue, not just for the health and benefit of our young people, but also for the economy as a whole. Now, while we should continue to invest in technological breakthroughs, I'm really concerned that the government doesn't have a strategy for our young people who could be pushed out of the job market by automation, and I'd be really grateful to hear the Minister respond to that point. There are also a lack of alternatives for young people who wish to upskill, as the apprenticeship pathway is so limited. Businesses tell me that the apprenticeship levy doesn't work, despite the government's attempts at reform. The Liberal Democrats have long called for reform to replace it with a wider skills and training levy that will give businesses real flexibility over how they spend the money to train their staff, and consequently provide young people with a better avenue to enter the workforce. The decision taken to defund Level 7 apprenticeships for over 22s risks limiting those opportunities. In 2024-25, 51% of all apprenticeship starts were of those aged 25 and over. This is a critical skills pipeline in the areas which are key to economic growth. And while the economy is changing so rapidly, we need to provide opportunities for older workers to retrain so that they can continue to find meaningful work later in life. The Liberal Democrats would fix the skills and recruitment crisis by investing in education and training, including the availability of apprenticeships and career advice for young people. The current system needs to be reformed. This would include boosting the take-up of apprenticeships by guaranteeing that they are paid at least the national minimum wage from the first year, creating new lifelong skills grants for adults to spend on education and training throughout their lives, and expanding vocational training. And while the Liberal Democrats welcome discussions in the budget regarding a wider youth guarantee and a growth and skills levy package, I'm still yet to understand a timeline for this implementation. And with youth unemployment rising, I would really encourage the government to take quick and active steps to deliver this package.
Will my right honourable friend give way?
Steve Darling.
Sorry, I elevated you. So apologies, Deputy Speaker.
Still just honourable.
In Torbay, we have an incredible organisation called Sound Communities, and there's some young people who are not in the position to take up an apprenticeship because they need to build up confidence and so forth, because they may have suffered significant trauma in their lives. Sound Communities helps these youngsters get themselves in the right place to take up their place in this world. Would my right honourable friend agree with me is what we need is long-term funding to support these youngsters so they can have the opportunities and futures that they deserve?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for that intervention, and he's absolutely right. There are groups of young people who are facing specific barriers to entering employment, and we need to do all we can to provide them with the sustained support that they need to get into and stay in the workplace. Much of the UK's current workforce challenges are due to the mistakes made by the current government, with perhaps no bigger own goal than the surprise increase in employer national insurance contributions in the Chancellor's first budget. Almost every business I speak to, and I'm sure many other members of this House, tell me that the NIC's rise blindsided them and has since seriously damaged their cash flow and their ability to hire and retain staff. This policy alone has been so damaging to the business sector and has created an environment in which companies are discouraged from hiring young people. And recent government decisions include the devastating business rates hike in the Chancellor's most recent budget, which is causing huge damage to hospitality firms, with many now considering whether their business remains viable. Our hospitality businesses so frequently provide young people with their first jobs are now on their knees, and they need support from the government. While the government's statement yesterday on cutting business rates for pubs was a good first step, we need wholesale reform of our business rate system, and that's one more reason why the business community felt so betrayed by the last Conservative government, who promised reform but did nothing to help our struggling businesses. Happily.
To my honourable friend for giving way, I think she's highlighting two important things there. The increases on costs for businesses mean that they're not taking on young people, but more importantly, they're not actually being then able to support businesses, the supervisory roles that give those young people the development that they need, because they can't make the differentiation in terms of salary. But I'm standing here as a Scottish MP. The Scottish Government did not pass on the business rate relief the last time. They have confirmed that they will do for Barnett Consequentials, but does she agree with me that the Scottish Government are simply not doing enough in this area, and in fact we're in a worse position than what's being debated today?
Olney. I'm grateful to my honourable friend for her intervention, and she speaks very passionately about businesses in Scotland and the situation that they're facing, and I'm sure she's correct to say that it is even more challenging in Scotland. I'm concerned that the government's sole focus on pubs and live music venues ignores the other retail, hospitality and leisure sectors which also need support. So I urge the government to adopt Liberal Democrat proposals to cut the rate of VAT on hospitality, accommodation and attractions to 15% until April 2027, which would give our businesses the boost they so desperately need. Our high streets and town centres are in urgent need of help, and I urge the government to act with all swiftness. And with the hospitality sector struggling to employ new workers, damage is being done to the prospects of our young people, struggling with unemployment levels, and this will be detrimental to the broader economy. At the heart of this debate is regular people who are finding it incredibly difficult to find a job, to support themselves, their partners, their children, their families, to pay rent, to pay for groceries, to pay for essentials, and that's what mustn't get lost in this debate. While the government seems to be weighing up its options on the EU reset, they should be reminded that negotiating a new UK-EU customs union is the single biggest step that the UK could take to boost our economy, our businesses and our young people's job prospects. The appalling agreement negotiated by the Conservative Party has been a complete disaster for our country, particularly for small businesses who are held back by reams of red tape and new barriers to trade. So many young people I talk to are simply frustrated that they are the first generation who are having to start their career while reaping the consequences of the Conservatives' botched deal. And it seems evident from these benches that the government knows that the UK must rectify the dismal trade deal negotiated by the Conservatives, and I'm yet to hear a compelling reason from the government as to why ministers keep refusing to negotiate a new customs agreement with Europe. The steps that the government is taking to rebuild our relationship with the EU are welcomed by the Liberal Democrats, but I urge the government to be bolder. This House voted in favour of joining a bespoke UK-EU customs union just last month, and I urge the government to seize this momentum, reach out to our European allies and negotiate a deal which would be mutually beneficial, creating countless new jobs for our young people here in the UK. The government cannot ignore the difficulties facing our young people anymore. Our young people need to be provided with a pathway for success and fewer barriers to getting onto the career ladder. But I'm afraid the government is failing to facilitate this. So I urge ministers to listen, adopt a joined-up strategy to tackle youth unemployment, invest in young people's skills, boost apprenticeships and work-based training, and support our businesses to create good quality jobs. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Alice Macdonald.
It's a pleasure to speak in this debate on such an important subject, youth unemployment. And when I think of this subject, what immediately comes to mind is the young woman I met on the doorstep during the election campaign, who told me how she had been looking for work for a long time and just didn't know how she was going to get a job. The hopelessness she felt was clear. Like her, far too many young people were left stuck at home and let down under the last government. Because as we have heard, it was during their last term in power that the number of young people not in education, employment or training shot up, growing by almost 50% between 2021 and 2024. They left a situation for young people where doors appeared to only close and never open. The government is determined to change that, and so am I. And speaking to young people in Norwich, I know that they want that change too. That's why opportunity has been one of my key priorities since day one, with a focus on opportunity for children and young people. And young people have spoken to me about some of the specific challenges they face in Norfolk. My honourable member on the benches opposite alluded to it. For example, poor transport infrastructure, meaning it can be difficult to get to work. And of course, the challenge of mental health. But we need to better understand why so many young people have been left behind, which is why I welcome the Alan Milburn review, which will do exactly that. Because the causes of youth inactivity are not simple. We can't put them down to one single factor. They are complex. They're not one size fits all. And we have to look at the structural causes as well. And it is crucial within that review that the voices of young people themselves are heard. I know there has been a call out for evidence, but I hope the Minister could expand on how young people in Norwich and across the country can get involved in this consultation. And I also want to mention the specific challenges faced by young people with SEND. This was a theme that parents and young people have raised with me time and time again in Norwich North. That they felt that too often there was a cliff edge at 16 where young people were left at risk of being left without adequate support to either continue into education or to find a job that met their needs. And I know there is much we disagree on in this House, as we have heard today, but I do hope that we can all agree that we do want a country where young people are supported into good jobs, work and employment and are able to fulfil their potential. So I want to welcome the government's approach, and I wanted to touch on some of the programmes that are being rolled out so far. The 360 youth hubs, and I am pleased that there will be 3 in Norfolk, including 1 in Norwich. And thousands more training and workplace opportunities in sectors from construction to health and social care for young people on universal credit. And, of course, the jobs guarantee. That means that 18 to 21-year-olds on universal credit who have been looking for work for more than 18 months will be provided with 6 months of paid employment. And we must also focus on early intervention. This is key, as Youth Futures have identified key factors that increase the risk of a young person and being not in education, employment or training include poor school attendance, low attainment at GCSE and exclusion. And that's why the schools white paper will also be so important and why it is vital that this is a whole of government approach. So I welcome also that the government is investing in a new preventative tool that will help share data between councils and schools so that we can identify and support young people most at risk. Madam Deputy Speaker, I just want to turn to the local. I'm working closely with the local DWP Job Centre in Norwich, City College and the Honourable Member for Norwich South to identify more work that can be done locally on this important agenda. And indeed we met yesterday to discuss how we can help match young people with employment opportunities locally. And I also regularly meet with local employers and apprenticeship providers to hear their perspectives. And there is much good work already underway. Last year, I was pleased to welcome the Minister for Social Security and Disability to visit Mind in Norwich. We learned about their excellent local project, Routes into Employment, which helps people living with young mental health conditions to find and keep paid employment that suits their individual needs. We spoke to a young person who had benefited from that support and a local employer who had given that young person a chance but had also felt many benefits themselves. I'm pleased the Minister was looking at this project as it is exactly the kind of thing we should be supporting. And I also welcome the government's investment in the Connect to Work scheme in Norfolk, working with Norfolk County Council, which will support over 4,000 Norfolk residents facing extra barriers into work. And I know that will benefit many young people. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I visited a local sixth form late last year. One of the many questions that I got was about how we can equalise the minimum wage, because they told me that they often felt underpaid and undervalued. And I was pleased to be able to tell them that this government is listening, that paying young people a decent wage does matter, and that in fact, just a few days later, I think it was, we raised the national minimum wage for young people too. And for any members opposite who challenge this, and it felt like they were a little bit, I challenge them to look young people in the eye and tell them why they don't deserve to be paid fairly, why their futures shouldn't be invested in, and why they don't deserve that support. Because my message to all young people today is under this government, you won't find false promises or quick solutions that fail to materialise, but you will find a proper plan backed by investment that puts its money where its mouth is and invests in your future. Thank you.
Damian Hinds.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There are many ways that you can express it, but none of them are good. Youth unemployment is at 15.9%. It's up 10%. It's up 1.5 percentage points. It's up over 100,000 in the last year. It is at a 10-year high, higher, Madam Deputy Speaker, than in the COVID era. And let's be clear, this is not economic inactivity we are talking about, it is unemployment. The definition of unemployment is not about who's claiming benefits, it's about having had no income whatsoever, not having worked for a paid hour in the reference week. It is about being available for work and actively looking work. That is the number that has gone up. And there seems to be a particular thing about there being an increasing number of people who are both studying and seeking to work. People who, by the way, for whom 0 hours contracts are particularly relevant, and I'll come back to that point. Unemployment overall has gone up, but it is young people that have borne the brunt. The rate of increase has been almost twice for young people as it has overall. Now that, to be fair, is usually the case. When there is rising unemployment, it is always young people who feel it first and feel it hardest. And why is that? Well, first of all, as my right honourable friend, the Shadow Secretary of State, said, the first thing that employers do when things look uncertain or difficult is stop hiring. You have a hiring freeze, the quickest way to cut down the payroll. Secondly, if you're going to be letting people go, redundancy, I'm afraid, is cheaper when it comes to younger people than, on average, older people, and so companies sometimes deploy a LIFO rule, last in, first out. And then, of course, there's the secondary effect that there are more experienced workers available who can fill your vacancies. And then on top of that, we've got the situation at the moment that sectors that disproportionately employ young people in shops, in restaurants, in hotels, throughout retail, hospitality and leisure, have been particularly hard hit by the national insurance hike and by the business rates hike. Now, I say usually youth unemployment tends to rise faster and be higher than overall unemployment. That is true, but it is not as much true in this country historically as it is in the rest of Europe. Now, there are exceptions to that. In Germany and the Netherlands, for example, but in southern Europe, and we remember this from after the crash under the previous Labour government, 2007-8, and talk of a lost generation in southern Europe when youth unemployment rates soared so high. Now, why should that be different in those countries compared to countries like ours historically? Well, there's a fancy economics term for it, which is insider-outsider theory. It basically says that when you have a system which has very heavily regulated labour markets, has very high levels of employment protection, and a very heavy involvement of trades unions, when there are economic troubles, all the help tends to go to the people who are in work, and it's those trying to get into work, the outsiders, who suffer as a result. And so our country historically has had, not totally liberalised, but more liberalised labour markets, and that has meant that we have not had those problems with youth unemployment historically to the same extent as some of our near neighbours in Europe, and we have tended to recover more quickly from those problems when they do occur. Today, right now, we have the historical rarity, I'm not sure it's quite unique in history, but it is certainly a historic rarity, that the ratio today in this country of youth unemployment to total unemployment in the UK is higher than it is in the EU. And that is before we feel all the effects of the Employment Rights Act. Some effects, I'm sure, are there already, but we have yet to feel the full effect, because that Act will discourage taking on new workers, and it will especially discourage taking on new, untested workers, and that is, of course, what youth unemployment is. Now, can I just talk about one aspect of that Act, which is 0 hours contracts? And I know 0 hours contracts have a special place in Labour mythology, and it comes from the time when the last leader of the Labour Party, the honourable member for Islington used to bring up zero-hours contracts every week at Prime Minister's questions as an epidemic ripping apart our country. We researched at the time how big a deal zero-hours contracts were. It turned out that fewer than 3% of workers had a zero-hours contract as their main job. There were others who had it then as a second job, many of them, by the way, working in the NHS as bank staff, and there were lots and lots of students. It turned out the average number of hours on a zero-hours contract was, in fact, 25, and here's the bit that nobody could accept. The average job satisfaction of people on a zero-hours contract was higher than it was for workers overall. Now, by the way, they've all been grimacing a little bit. I don't know how many colleagues opposite know that the proportion of people on zero-hours contracts has gone up since the general election of 2024. They are just a part of our. They're just a part of our economy. They are also heavily skewed towards young people. Students working in sectors like hospitality and other seasonal occupations. About 40% of people with a zero-hours contract job are under 25. I myself was once a young person with a zero-hours contract. I just didn't know it was called a zero-hours contract. And if colleagues across the House think about their first job, perhaps working in a restaurant, perhaps washing up, perhaps working shifts in a shop, where you didn't know at the start that you were going to be working exactly the same number of hours every week and so on. Actually, it turns out a lot of us had our first opportunity in the world of work through a zero-hours contract. And it will be true. It will be true for people after the Employment Rights Act. Those who have such a contract will have some extra guarantees in their contract. But it will also be, from an employer's point of view, a bigger deal, actually adding some risk to take them on. And what will be the balance? I would love to give way, and I will. What will be the balance for employers and for employees? It is, for ministers, a leap of faith. The honourable gentleman.
Thank you. Can I appreciate the knowledge and passion my right honourable friend has for this session. And I just suggest to him he perhaps underestimates the impact sometimes these insecure work has on it. One of my brother's last jobs, he had to get in the car and start driving to work each morning to then get a phone call to tell him whether he had a shift that day or not. Do you not think it's reasonable that people like my brother should be able to know their shift a day in advance? That's the issue we're really talking about in insecure work. I understand he's making a political point, but these are real people's lives as well.
Damian Hinds.
I'm not making a political point. Of course I think it's right and reasonable, and all good employers who want to keep their employees, of course, they will do the right thing and try to give them visibility. The Employment Rights Act does an awful lot more than just let people know some time in advance about the hours of their next shift. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, with all of the effects that we will see from the Employment Rights Act and what we will see with these taxation changes and others, it's not going to be mass layoffs that people will see. It's just young people, not being taken on in the first place. And why does that matter? And the Minister said this herself. Because of the scarring effect of youth unemployment. We know from studies that you can be, if you're out of work in your early 20s, you can still be suffering the effects of that 20 and 30 years further on. And there are things the government could do to mitigate some of what is happening, including on the regulations coming out of the Employment Rights Act. But I just wonder overall why they are doing it. I think they are doing it because in a world where there have been enough U-turns from this, actually not enough yet, U-turns from this government, but a lot of U-turns. This is something that Labour MPs can bring home and say this is a proper left-wing policy that we have enacted. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, do they really want to bring home higher levels of unemployment and higher levels of youth unemployment in their constituencies? Because that is what will happen. Now, the government have brought in a number of schemes to try and mitigate what's going on, some of which are welcome. All governments introduce schemes somewhat like these, but the 55,000 people who will be eligible for the jobs guarantee, Madam Deputy Speaker, is in a context of more than 900,000 people who are not in education, employment or training. It's limited in the areas it covers, and I think it's only the eligibility is you have to have been searching for a job for 18 months or more, which obviously would count out many of these young people. And I welcome Connect to Work that was mentioned by the honourable gentleman opposite. I don't think it's particularly meant for young people, but nevertheless, it is helpful, I think, for people who have been, or potentially helpful for people who've been off on long-term sick. Though the timings, I thought, sounded ambitious when the government first announced it, and I would welcome from the Minister in summing up where they expect to be at the end of this financial year in terms of the numbers, including in my county of Hampshire. I know I've been talking already for 10 minutes. I do want to, if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, I do want to just set the record straight a little bit about apprenticeships, which has come up a number of times. And I hope I can help the House with a non-partisan description of what has actually happened on apprenticeships in this country over the last 20 or more years. The truth is that under the previous Labour government, and also under the first few years of the coalition government, there were many, many tens of thousands of young people doing an apprenticeship who didn't even know that they were on an apprenticeship. So thin and flimsy were those apprenticeships. And that, yet he may screw up his face, that is true, and the research evidence is available, and that is why we reformed apprenticeships to say they should be a minimum of 1 year, a minimum of 20% time off the job, with endpoint assessments and the qualification designed by employers themselves and overseen by an independent institute for apprenticeships. And yes, when you do that, the number of apprenticeships then does go down. And the numbers that the Minister was quoting were all from after that change. Of course, when you make the specifications of a qualification considerably more exacting, of course that has an effect on the numbers. And what the new government are doing now, guess what? The minimum length for an apprenticeship, what's it going to be? 8 months. Yeah. Madam Deputy Speaker, try telling a German captain of industry that you can do an apprenticeship in 8 months. Will the numbers go up? Of course the numbers are going to go up. I recently met hairdressers in my constituency, and it reminded me, I think, of how all of this comes together. And hairdressers, like hospitality business and others, they bring people into our town centres. They're more than just employers, and it's not something that you can just move online. But they are now facing seriously higher employment costs, including the national insurance contributions, and in many cases, much higher business rates too. And that's before you get to the looming impact of the employment regulation. They also have a very strong tradition of taking on large numbers of young people and apprenticeships. My worry is that with the increase in costs, it will be simply unaffordable to take on young people in nearly the same numbers. And the same is true for pubs and many other employers. We are seeing the early effects of government policy in these youth unemployment numbers we see today. But I'm afraid, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I take no pleasure in saying this whatsoever, I'm afraid they are going to get materially worse. And I ask the government to take that seriously and act on it, not with some programmes, some short-term programmes to put people just through a programme, but to rethink their approach, to make it easier and to make it less costly to take on young people to start their careers and build their futures.
Andrew Lewin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased we have an opportunity to talk about young people, how we invest in their future, extend opportunities and do all in our power to leave nobody behind. But I think to have a serious debate about the prospects of young people in work, we need to look back at the unique set of circumstances that people in their late teens and early 20s have faced growing up. They are the first generation to grow up in Brexit Britain. They had no say in the decision to leave and to devastate the trading relationship with our single largest trading partner. Their opportunities to work, study and travel in the EU were taken away by the party opposite at great cost to them and to the economy. This is a cohort of young people who were teenagers during the pandemic, patiently abiding by lockdown to protect their families, but with months, if not years, outside of the classroom. And to be clear, I supported the public health measures, but the chaotic way that school closures were overseen were indefensible. And the most fateful days were the 4th and 5th of January 2021. On the 4th of January, they were marched back into school. On the 5th, they were sent home again. Here today and gone tomorrow, much like the Conservative MPs that we've seen defecting to reform. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, Brexit, the chaotic Conservative management of the pandemic and Liz Truss blowing up the economy. That was the legacy left for young people by the last government. This government is resolved to turn it around, and we understand that good prospects for young people must start with a strong economic foundation. Since coming to office, the Bank of England have, in their judgment, made the decision to cut interest rate 6 times. GDP growth last year was ahead of forecasts, and there are 500,000 more people in the labour market today than there were in July 2024. There are good reasons to be positive about the economy in 2026, but I absolutely recognise we can't be complacent. I know how difficult it can be for young people, yes, because of the Conservative inheritance, but also due to the structural changes we are seeing. There can be intense competition for entry-level jobs. There is anxiety about the impact of artificial intelligence, and there are still too many people in insecure work. If a strong economy is the first pillar for success, the second is to have a government that is willing to intervene to help young people. This comes through investment in skills, access to training, and where needed, support to be placed in your first role. It's vital to invest both in further education and higher education. In the community that I represent, I am proud that Welwyn Garden City is home to Oaklands College and Hatfield home to the University of Hertfordshire. We should be ambitious for at least 2/3 of young people to go to college, start an apprenticeship or attend university. And across Welwyn and Hatfield, I believe that number can be higher still. The vast majority of young people still move out of education and quickly into work. But the jobs guarantee is a serious intervention needed to provide some people with the additional support that they need. The offer from the government is clear. If you're 18 to 21, in receipt of universal credit and have been searching for work for 18 months or more, you will be offered paid employment for 6 months. Now, that full scheme will cost the government £820 million, but this is an active choice to invest in young people, and it is a down payment on their future success. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is also the right choice to have passed the Employment Rights Act. Thanks to the actions of this Labour government, this generation of young people will no longer have to endure exploitive zero-hours contracts, but they will have rights to guaranteed shifts. They will have day-one rights to paternity leave, and no longer will people be excluded from statutory sick pay because their pay was too low. Madam Deputy Speaker, the last Conservative government wasn't prepared to intervene to support young people. The opposition today and their friends in Reform voted against stronger rights at work for young people. The Liberal Democrats bravely abstained. It's only a Labour government that understands for young people to succeed, we need a strong economy, continued investment in education, and a willingness to intervene when the market alone doesn't provide the right opportunities. Young people backed Labour at the last election, and with the Employment Rights Act, job guarantee and a rising living wage, we are backing them to succeed in the economy that we are turning around.
Joy Morrissey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I appreciate that everyone across this House cares about youth unemployment, but the way of tackling it is very different depending on the side of the benches that you hail from. And I see that we have a rising youth unemployment, and the issue here is taxation. We have taxation on our businesses. They are being taxed with the national insurance rate. It's increasing. They're also the business rates on the high street. If it's hospitality, if it's retail, they are being taxed to the point where they cannot take on another employee. And usually that first employee is a young person. It's someone who they're giving an opportunity to for the first time. And making the job market so rigid, protecting workers' rights to the point where there will be no jobs available for workers by the time these young people get into employment, because it is so restrictive on businesses. They will not want to take on a new employee. One, they won't be able to afford it. Two, there will be so much restriction on that new employee coming into work for them, they just won't do it. And we won't see this being dealt with. This will just continue to rise. I have young people who have come to me. They just finished a degree in mathematics from Cambridge. They can't find a job. I have someone else whose son just had a law degree. They can't find a job. I have people from across every sector and their children saying either if it's a business, they can't actually take on a new employee because they simply can't afford it. And then on the other side, I have parents who are desperate to get their child into any job. And as my honourable friend mentioned, apprenticeships and zero-hour contracts were a way for a young person to get their first job in hospitality, to work in retail, to have the opportunity to start working. Working in an environment with other people creates lessons that you take forward in your life to other jobs and opportunities. And that is what we need for young people. And just to provide, Madam Deputy Speaker, some historic context for what was said earlier from the Minister. In 2010, the Conservatives inherited from Labour youth unemployment of 20%. Nearly 1 million young people out of work. Before the pandemic hit in 2020, the Conservatives had nearly halved that to just 12%. When we left office in 2024, despite the pandemic's effects, it was just 13%. The result of fixing our economy, driving up educational standards, making work pay. Building an apprenticeship system that fosters aspiration. I'll give way.
And I was really impressed how she was representing our constituencies and businesses. I loved her summary of recent youth unemployment, but the reality is as we came into power in 2024, youth unemployment was rising. And so we can't blame the problems we're faced with now on the current government. You could argue we're not making it better and we could do more, but youth unemployment was rising at the time we took power, was it not? And it had been rising for many years.
Morrissey, that intervention leads me to the statistics that we currently have today, because it is actually nearly at 16%. 729,000 young people now out of work, a staggering 103,000 higher than a year ago. A further 2.88 million young people economically inactive. That is more than when Labour took over from us, just to point that out. That's statistically accurate. And I'll give way.
So I absolutely accept that youth unemployment is higher now than we took office, and I regret that, and it's great to see the government's doing more on it. But the point I was making is the point we were took office, youth unemployment was rising, and it was rising fast. It's continued to rise, but it was rising. That's the point I'm making.
Morrissey. Well, this is a youth unemployment crisis of Labour's own making. Because of the national insurance tax hikes, because of the restrictions on business, I will make some progress on my speech. This will continue to be a problem that this government faces. Mark my words. In my own constituency of Beaconsfield, Marlow, and the South Bucks villages, we have an incredible restaurant in Beaconsfield called the Greyhound. It is incredible. I strongly urge everyone to go and eat there. And they have a wonderful apprenticeship program that helps young people get their first job in hospitality. Now, this is an incredible opportunity for young people. I've gone to speak to them, and they say, this is great. I wasn't enjoying school. I now have an opportunity for a career in hospitality. I'm trained in every level of hospitality. They gave me a tour of the wine cellar and sort of everything in between, and they love this, and they're passionate about it. But the Greyhound is telling me that many businesses, not just the Greyhound, cannot actually continue their apprenticeship program because of the backdrop of the national insurance tax rate and an eye-watering hike in their business rates. They simply cannot continue this very successful program that has changed young people's lives. This is a government that failed to listen to the urgent calls of businesses to stop their employment rights bill, which will destroy jobs, creating rights for jobs that will no longer exist. Young people need businesses to be able to create jobs for them, not be hamstrung by tax and employment policies that force employers to have to curtail opportunity. This is also a government sowing utter chaos into our apprenticeship system at every turn. With Labour, government's rising youth unemployment, indeed all unemployment, becomes a sad inevitability. But different choices can change that course for our young people and create a better future. Lowering business taxes to enable businesses to create jobs will help tackle this problem. Putting evidence before ideology in education so that standards rise and don't collapse. Scrapping business rates on the high street. You will see you'll see so many people coming back, so many businesses coming back, so many young people being employed. It will be a tremendous win for this government if they try that. Also, try reducing the tax burden for anybody under the age of 25, so scrapping the national insurance contribution for under 25s, and this government will see a tremendous rise in the take-up of people, young people taking their first job with a business, because you are reducing the risk for that business. Yeah. Instead, we're forcing over-regulation onto businesses, crippling them, closing them, and actually curtailing opportunities for young people. Creating an apprenticeship system built on aspiration that is employment, that is about employment choice and stability, so that we continue with the great work that was already started, and we continue to build that so young people have an opportunity through apprenticeships to get their first job and start their first career. This is the future our young people deserve. Thank you.
Yeah. Naushabah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The debate today lays bare the sheer hypocrisy of the Conservative Party. Now, while I certainly do not welcome the numbers that we are seeing in youth unemployment and recognise the challenge we have, this was not an issue that was created today, but was overseen by 14 years of their government, with young people steadily pushed into the margins, leaving nearly 1 million young people neat on their watch. It is now quite convenient for them to come to this House and point fingers at those who are tasked with fixing the damage they caused. And let's not forget what they did to... Oh no, I will continue. And let's not forget the damage that they caused when they cut youth services by 70% in real terms since 2010. A government that presided over the rising NEET numbers year after year cannot claim surprise. The consequences of hollowing out our skills system that once gave young people a route into meaningful work, whilst also watching more and more young people fall out of the labour market due to ill health. The Leader of the Opposition said in her speech today, when referring to the member for Clacton, that Britain needs an engineer, not a used car salesman. It's quite funny, isn't it? 14 years of Conservative government has left a generation of young people who might not have the opportunity to be either. When the last Labour government left office, they left a strong foundation of support for young people. A national careers guidance service, robust apprenticeships and a clear vocational pathway. 14 years later, those foundations lie in ruins. Connections advisors are gone, opportunities for training has been slashed, and as I said, nearly 1 million young people were left economically inactive. I will not give way at this point. We're now left to rebuild what should never have been dismantled. Now, it is promising to see exactly what this Labour government is doing. I welcome our youth guarantee that will create 350,000 new training and workplace opportunities, supported by 360 youth hubs across the country, and the investment of £750 million in apprenticeships that will equip 50,000 more young people with skills for the future. I think we also recognise that the traditional path, one that allowed me to succeed, going to university, is not necessarily the right path for everyone. With a growing skills shortage, particularly in sectors such as house building and that we need for the infrastructure of the future, it is vital that we go further in encouraging young people to use their talents and feel confident that these career paths are also valued and given the respect that they deserved. I've made many visits to Mid-Kent College that serves my constituency in Gillingham and Rainham, where young people are learning trades and are really passionate about what they do. They have skills in bricklaying, carpentry, welding, hairdressing, woodwork, skills that my university degree could never have given me, and we must ensure that these avenues are fully supported so that young people can contribute meaningfully to our country's future. I will go.
To Honourable Member for giving way. She's talking about further in vocational education. It's very important. But I think the other aspect of it is that it actually helps those young people where school has not been a success. And it's not just about the skills that they learn, it's about that arm that is put around them. Does she share my concern that in my own constituency of North East Fife, the Rural Agricultural College in Cooper has effectively mothballed its building and moved a number of its courses online, meaning that young people studying animal care, for for example, are missing out on those arm-supporting opportunities that they desperately need.
I thank the Honourable Member for her intervention, and I do completely agree that these routes are available to young people, offer an alternative, but also offer them a space where they can have an opportunity to thrive, and they might not have been able to do that in a traditional academic setting. So I recognise the need for us to ensure that all those opportunities are protected in whichever way possible. So I recognise the work that she's doing in her constituency to continue to promote that. I know many of the young constituents in Gillingham and Rainham will welcome this government's approach. More specifically, Jack, a 19-year-old constituent of mine, wrote to me and said, "I am trying to build a future for myself, but without anyone giving me a chance, it feels impossible to get started. I want to work, to contribute and become independent, but at the moment, I feel stuck and unsupported." Madam Deputy Speaker, my heart broke reading that. And I know that we have a lot of work to do as a government to get this right. But the members opposite should also recognise their part in creating this legacy that has left thousands of young people who might feel despair or hopelessness. We cannot have a generation stuck in limbo and truly struggling, not because of the lack of their talent or drive, but because the system has been deliberately dismantled. When I was 19, living a few streets away from Jack, where he lives today, my future did not feel the same way it does for him. And this is what we've got to recreate, that sense of hope and opportunity in this country. I'm glad that through my office and the actions of this government, we may be able to give Jack the help that he needs. But it is a moral stain on our country that we have allowed young people to reach a point where they will put those words to paper and it feels like a reality. So I hope that we can get to the heart of this issue, and I will back the government in terms of what it is doing to tackle youth unemployment as a matter of urgency.
Bradley Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, the facts speak for themselves. 15.9% is the rate of youth unemployment for those aged between 16 to 24. That's 700,000 people. 946,000 young people aged between 16 to 24 categorised as NEETs. That's not in employment, educational training. An 11% drop in adverts during the 12 months from July 2024 to July 2025, in a staggering 14.6% increase under this Labour government in the unemployment rate of those aged between 16 to 17. And it's quite clear, when I go out and about amongst my constituency and talk to businesses, particularly small businesses that are functioning in retail, hospitality, leisure, the first rung on the employment ladder for so many, they are crying out. They are making it known loud and clear that the tax rises brought about by this government, rising energy costs, rising bureaucracy, are eroding not just their margins but their sense of confidence as businesses. And that perhaps is the most corrosive effect of all, because once these businesses are gone, the opportunities for young people to get on that first rung of the employment ladder diminish. And I'm particularly struck listening to comments across the chamber today, Madam Deputy Speaker, at what I consider to be the fundamental ideological difference of the two sides of the House, between my party and the government. And that is, where is wealth created? Where is wealth generated? Government does not create wealth. Government can play a role in catalysing the foundations of our prosperity. It is right that government leans into this and creates schemes where necessary. But at its core, it is small businesses. It's empowering individuals to take risks that will enable the economy to prosper. We see it time and time again. It's noble that the government wants to intervene to support businesses in creating jobs. It's noble that the government wants to create routes for young people to develop their skills to enter jobs of the future. But we're just not seeing enough hard action that acknowledges the reality of where wealth is generated. And I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. He talks about differences on two sides of the chamber, and we've heard today that most of the answers coming from the government is, we've got a government programme for that. Does he think that most young people would prefer a rebranded government programme or a job?
Well, the best welfare programme of all is a job. Nothing will come close, both in terms of the earnings that people can receive in recognition and reward for their contribution, but also in terms of their self-confidence. And we haven't heard very much, if anything, during this debate about incentives for those to take risks themselves. Ultimately, every single business that employs people of all ages have been created by someone who's taken a risk because they've been empowered to put something on the line, whether that's capital in terms of money, it could be time. Every business, whether small or large, started off by somebody taking a risk. And our economy is becoming increasingly absent of risk. We're so risk averse, and this is only exacerbated as a result of the pressure being placed on businesses across the board, whether it is those rising employment costs, whether it's the rising energy costs, whether it's the rising bureaucracy. And we're hearing many organisations that are experts in this field directly critique the policies that have come from government. Centre for Social Justice, the Institute of Directors, the British Chamber of Commerce and UK Hospitality are all saying collectively that the choices made by this government are having a detrimental and corrosive effect on the employment prospects of society as a whole, but particularly young people. So I urge the government to focus less on work programmes, to speak directly with those who take the risks to employ people of all ages. Government needs to get off the backs of those who are taking risks. It needs to support them. It needs to be less burdensome. In the words of the Prime Minister when he was elected and gave his very first speech in 10 Downing Street, he said the government was going to tread much more lightly on people's lives. This government is doing the absolute opposite, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it needs to change.
Chris Vins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to speak in this debate. And I want to start by thanking my right honourable friend, the Minister, and also the Shadow Minister for starting this debate, because it is a really important debate, and it's hugely important that members from across the House have the opportunity to speak about it. The previous member who spoke suggested that members on this side of the House were risk adverse. I'm going to prove that I'm going to take a risk this afternoon, and I'm going to attempt to do a speech where I make no political points. And the risk is, if I do make a political point at any time, I will allow the honourable member for Beverley at Holness to do an intervention on me. I think that's very fair. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to start by taking the House back to lockdown in March 2020. I'd made the decision I was going to leave teaching, not going to go into why, because I don't want to make any political points. But I decided it was time to leave teaching. And I went to see my head teacher and said that I want to resign, and he convinced me to stay on until September of the start of the next academic year. So I handed in my notice on the 22nd of March 2020. Now, if anyone knows anything about their history, they will know that resigning on the 22nd of March 2020 was quite a gamble, because the following day the country changed and we went into lockdown. And I found myself working from home, online lessons, that sort of thing, but thinking to myself, I've got to now find a new job during lockdown. And, I wasn't worried about it in April or May or June, but when we got to August, I was starting to think, oh my gosh, in a couple of weeks' time, I'm going to be unemployed. And I want to make that point, and, I'm not to pretend I was particularly young in March 2020, so I'm not trying to claim I'm a young person. But the reason I wanted to just tell that particular story, because for me, the idea of being unemployed was terrifying, because I recognised the huge impact being unemployed for any length of time would have on my mental health. And I think members across the House will agree that actually people that do suffer from mental health, and there's lots of different degrees, and we recognise that, but actually work can be a solution to mental health issues. That opportunity to give back to society, to provide, gives that self-worth, which is really, really important. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to make most of my speech today about the work that Harlow College are doing, because no, that's a political comment, can't make that one. I came to this House not to be negative, not to talk down the country, but to talk up Harlow. And in Harlow, over the last year, the number of young people, not in education, employment or training has gone down. And one of the main reasons that is the work that Harlow College has done. And I particularly, Madam Deputy Speaker, want to pay tribute to their principal, Karen Spencer, who has actually written a few things, not too long, not as long as my mother would write, don't worry, about what Harlow College are doing, working alongside schools in my constituency of Harlow to actually get the NEET rate down in Harlow, and I want to thank them for the work they're doing. Harlow College developed a targeted NEET programme that recognised the complex barriers many young people face through flexible entry routes, small provision groups and strong pastoral support. Learners are helped to rebuild confidence, re-engage with the education and progress into further study and employment. Importantly, these students are fully integrated to college life, including English and Maths, enrichment activities and digital support. Harlow College also recognises that preventing young people becoming NEET must begin earlier. And I think this is a really important point that we can all understand. I know young people in Harlow who have been out of employment for a number of years, whose parents perhaps have been out of work for a number of years, and we've got to change that culture. The college works closely with local schools, including Passmore's cooperative learning community. I have said community cooperative, which is technically political, but it is the title of the Multi Academy Trust. And I want to particularly pay tribute to Vic Goddard, the executive head of Passmore's cooperative learning community, for the work that he's done in working with the college, because it's got to work both ways. Working with the college, with college staff, and going directly into schools, discussing careers, supporting applications, and helping young people prepare for these interviews. This early collaborative approach reduces the risk of young people falling through the gaps at key transition points and demonstrating the vital role that further education colleges play in tackling needs and supporting social mobility. Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman for Beverley and Hinds hasn't intervened, so I don't think I've made any political points. But I just want to finish by saying I am absolutely determined that young people in my constituency of Harlow have the best opportunity moving forward. I am delighted that this Labour government are investing in my town, that the UK Health Security will have its permanent home in Harlow, which will be the high-tech, high-skilled jobs for the future of young people in Harlow. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Shivani Raja.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Every young person I speak to in Leicester wants the same basic things. They want to work, they want to earn, to learn and to build a future for themselves. They want the dignity that comes from that first pay packet, the confidence that comes from responsibility, and the chance to prove themselves in the workplace. They do not want to sit on the sidelines of our economy. And let's be honest, Madam Deputy Speaker, neither do we. I hear constantly about the government's ambition to do things, their ambition for more people to be in employment, the ambition for this, the ambition for that. But Madam Deputy Speaker, ambition does not create jobs. It's not just the government that has ambition. Young people have ambition. They have the ambition to succeed, to buy a house with their wages, to raise a family. Ambition in our young people is not lacking, but again, ambition does not create jobs. Jobs only exist when employers can afford to take people on, to take a risk in expanding or even starting a business. And right now, this government's policies are making that harder, not easier. Yeah. What young people lack are opportunities. Entry-level jobs are disappearing, not because young people are unwilling to take them, but because businesses are increasingly unable to afford the risk of hiring them. Okay. This government repeatedly underestimates how employers respond to rising costs. I know the government front bench and a large section of the party opposite have never worked in the private sector. I know they won't understand the risks of starting a business or the risks of working in the private sector. I know they never have had to meet a payroll or had sleepless nights about whether there is enough cash to take any salary at all, or whether taking on another member of staff will cripple them. I come from the private sector. I understand businesses. My family runs its own businesses, so let me help them and understand. Higher employer national insurance, rising business rates, and increased regulatory risk all feed into the same calculation.
When margins are tight, businesses do not take chances. They prioritise experience over potential. And that is rational behaviour, but it locks young people out of the labour market. As we've heard in the House today, youth unemployment now stands at 15.9%, and nearly 1 million young people are not in education, employment, or in training. And that is not because young people have stopped trying. It is because the number of entry-level opportunities available to them is shrinking. Retail, hospitality, and leisure are where many young people learn how to work. They learn reliability, communication, and resilience. And these sectors operate on tight margins, and they employ a disproportionate number of young people, yet they are precisely the sectors being squeezed hardest by this government. And business groups have been clear about this. Yesterday, we heard the government announce further changes to business rates, including additional relief for pubs. Now, any support for struggling businesses is welcome, but temporary discounts, transitional reliefs, and future reviews does not change the fundamental problem. Costs are rising faster than confidence, and uncertainty discourages hiring. In my constituency of Leicester East, claimant counts already sit above the national average. For young people aged 18 to 24, the number claiming unemployment-related benefits has risen over the past year, which is hardly surprising given that businesses tell me that they are scaling back entry-level recruitment in response to these rising costs. The story I hear again and again is the same. Employers want to grow, but they can't justify the risk. And when the door to work closes, young people do not suddenly stop wanting to contribute. Instead, they are pushed towards welfare, not because they choose dependency, but because opportunity has been taken away. And that is how a benefit system becomes a waiting room rather than a springboard. And this matters, not just economically, but socially. Without early work experience, young people struggle to progress. Skills fade, confidence falls, and the distance to the labour market grows. And that is how temporary unemployment becomes long-term disengagement. Madam Deputy Speaker, this does not have to be the outcome. There is another way to get young people back into work. And we Conservatives believe the answer is not to manage decline through temporary reliefs and reviews, but to remove the barriers that stop businesses hiring in the first place. If this government is serious about tackling youth unemployment, it must stop focusing on managing the consequences of higher costs and start removing the barriers that prevent businesses from hiring in the first place. And that means backing small and medium-sized businesses, reducing the cost of employing people, and ensuring that our tax and regulatory system rewards job creation rather than punishing it. Young people want to work. They deserve the chance to work, and it is the responsibility of this House to make sure that government policy opens the door to opportunity rather than quietly closing it. Thank you.
Sean Woodcock.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a real pleasure to speak in this important debate on a vital topic, and there have been numerous fascinating contributions across the House, which is why I was so astonished at the contribution from the front bench, which was patronising young people when really she should have been apologising to them. Hundreds of thousands of young people fell out of employment, education and training on their watch. Now, in Banbury, youth employment is lower than the national average. I don't think that would surprise anybody. Soho Farmhouse, Celebrity Farmers, Chipping Norton Set, it may be assumed that youth unemployment is not something we know. You would, however, be wrong, because there are deep pockets of deprivation in places like Grimsby and Ruscott, both of which I served on as councillors for, but also in Chipping Norton itself. There are too many young people there who've been failed for far too long. And the result is they don't do things, they don't learn to drive, they find it difficult to get a job, they end up having shorter lives than people just down the road from them as a result. But in rural areas too, you'll see that things like the decimation of buses that we saw under austerity has led to some kids being unable to go to college, get into town, to go to that job, and so the cycle continues. The difficulties affecting our young people should actually anger all of us and upset our British sense of fairness, because our young people have so much to offer, and during the pandemic in 2020-2021, young people were asked to make sacrifices not made by any previous generation. Freshers' week at university or colleges, done via Zoom. Kickabouts with your mate down the park, not allowed. A night out on the town, banned. And what did they get in return? They were told by the party opposite at the last general election, go and do national service. This is a party who didn't help them get into and stay in work, with youth employment growing by almost 50% between 2021 and 2024. Now, under them, the UK was the only G7 country whose unemployment rate was lower than before the pandemic. They want to talk about records. That is your record. The only G7 country where that is the case. They want to come here and talk about what this government is doing. They're the ones who close youth centres. This government is opening youth hubs. This government are rolling out programmes to get people into work, in contrast to the Conservative plan to cut support. This government are overhauling job centres so that they support people both looking for work and serve businesses looking to recruit. We're also getting buses back on the road, by the way. This Labour government is providing a jobs guarantee. The opposition are guaranteeing absolutely nothing because they've learned absolutely nothing from the 14 years that they were in government.
Graham Stewart.
The gentleman for giving way. Unless he's finished. He's finished. We'll let him finish.
Sir Roger Gale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'll be very brief. In her remarks earlier this afternoon, the Honourable Lady, the member for Gillingham and Rainham, the Kent Member of Parliament, praised the work of the Mid-Kent College and the training that it's offering for young people in construction trades, and she was right to do so. And I'll add to that the work of the East Kent colleges, in similar vein, who are also doing a tremendous job under quite difficult circumstances. But there is a really small point in offering that training and skills only to see disappointment at the end of it because the opportunities have gone. A young man or a young woman trains as an electrician or a plumber or a bricklayer. They expect to then go on to earn money, to have a job as a plumber or an electrician or a bricklayer. But in the construction trades in East Kent, and she knows this, people are being laid off. House building is grinding to a halt. Houses are not selling, the market is flat. And that's all as a result of the fiscal policies of this government. Madam Deputy Speaker, in towns like Herne Bay and Sandwich, Birchington-on-Sea and Westgate-on-Sea in my constituency, very many of the jobs are hospitality-based. They are either directly in hospitality, the pubs, the restaurants, the small hotels, or they are dependent upon visitors that those other businesses attract. The seaside amusement arcades, Dreamland in Margate. All of these businesses are dependent on people having money to spend and being able to employ staff. But they're not, those staff are not being taken on. And those staff are the young people. Yes, I may be getting on a bit, but I can remember it. My first job was washing up in a restaurant, actually in Stratford-on-Avon, because I needed to earn some money, and I was able to walk in and do it. That's not happening now. They're laying off staff. They're not taking them on. And those staff, and it was said earlier by my right honourable friend, those staff are the young people who are not being employed. Why? It is as a direct result of the fiscal policies of this government. Directly or indirectly, it is national insurance. Directly or indirectly, it is business rates. Directly or indirectly, it is the cost of inputs, the cost of electricity. You can't run a restaurant or a pub without heating and lighting and the food to put on the table. And there are pubs closing in my constituency. One very recently, a couple of weeks ago, I heard. A lovely riverside pub, a place bizarrely known as Pluck's Gutter. But the Dog and Duck has shut because the young couple who were running it, who had a splendid summer season, found that at the end of the summer, business crashed. They couldn't employ the staff. They couldn't employ to pay the rates. They couldn't employ to pay the food for the food, the electricity, everything else that goes with running a good little riverside pub. So it's gone. Well, please God, it'll come back again. But they have had to retrench. And they put their heart and soul into this. And what I really want to say is, it is no good. We don't want sticking plaster, thank you. We don't want schemes. We don't want to be told, yes, you can do this, you can do that. There are these opportunities. These young people, soon my grandchildren, want jobs. They want the dignity of being able to go out, do a hard day's work, whether that's washing up in a cafe or picking fruit in an orchard or whatever, and get a pay packet at the end of it that they have earned, that they can spend as they want. That is the dignity of employment. That is what I fear this government is denying.
Graham Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to take part in this debate. How do we, as so many colleagues, certainly on this side of the House, have asked this afternoon, how do we persuade an employer? How do we create the incentives for an employer to take a chance on a young person who may have no work experience? They may be full of ambition, fresh ideas, curiosity, but with little or no experience to offer. When that same employer could choose an older candidate who's proven, reliable, familiar with the workplace. And if we can answer that question, Madam Deputy Speaker, then we'll help more than one person. We help ensure that the door to opportunity for people to have that dignity of work that my honourable friend has just talked about, to be provided. In 21 years, nearly 21 years, as a Member of Parliament now, with the Honourable Lady, the Minister, she, like me, will have visited hundreds of schools and asked thousands of students. I've certainly done so from Holderness Academy to Withensea High School, the same question. What do you want to be when you leave school? But not once, Madam Deputy Speaker, has a child replied unemployed. And for good reason. Young people are ambitious. They want the dignity of work that my honourable friend spoke about so passionately just now, over the indignity of welfare. They want to climb a ladder of opportunity. They want to not fall into the trap of dependency. And yet, and the Minister reflected this in her remarks, study after study tells us the same hard truth. Young people who experience long-term unemployment are more likely to end up poor, sick, and more isolated than their peers. No options, no hope. No way should we be consigning our young people to that fate. But Labour governments have done this before. And some of the contributions, I never want to question anyone's honesty, but to be so selective in this data, to talk about the 14 years so relentlessly and then not give youth unemployment figures for the 14 years. Not a single member opposite. They picked some 3-year period around COVID, which surely anyone fair-minded, I mean, the honourable gentleman back there, I thought he made a fair point, a fair statistical point. He said, OK, it's gone up under Labour, which he conceded. How refreshing. But he said it was going up when we came to power and that we should deal with it. That was a fair point, a point well made. But in 1997, youth unemployment stood at 14%. By 2010, it had climbed under the Socialists, party opposite, to 20%. By 2024, I'll make a little more progress and then happily give way, having referenced the honourable gentleman, the very least I can do. By 2024, it had been brought back to below 14%. So, again and again, Conservatives have brought youth unemployment down, and I've just touched on, others have touched on, the Minister's touched on, just how damaging it is for young people to be unemployed, how it has not just a short-term horrific impact, it has a lifelong impact. I don't quite know why that is the case, but data, study after study shows that it is. And now, less than 2 years in, the number is at 16% and rising. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we've seen this film before. And unless the government changes course, we know how it ends. So how do we change course? And I think colleagues on this side of the House have tried to indicate to colleagues opposite what it might be. And I know that they do lack experience of running businesses. So few of them have ever actually had to make that huge decision, that risk-filled decision of employing someone, of employing more people, of having to find the money to pay them at the end of the month, as well as pay all the taxes. But you do it by changing incentives, as any good economist knows. The single biggest cost for almost any business is its workforce. Yet this Chancellor has chosen to increase the minimum wage and so many other costs on business. In turn, the cost of employing 18 to 20-year-olds has risen not by £2,000, this just since July 2024, not by £3,000, Madam Deputy Speaker, but a staggering £4,095 in less than 2 years. So if we understand that behaviour is driven by incentives and you make it much more expensive to employ a young person compared to someone who's older, what happens? Well, it's not a surprise. The rate of youth unemployment has gone up. And, let me give way to the honourable gentleman.
I do thank him for giving way, and I do thank him for reflecting on longer than just the last few years. But if he's been in this place for 21 years, he'll remember, you referred to 2010, it wasn't because we had a socialist government in 2010, although I'm a big fan of Gordon Brown. It's because we had a global financial crisis, and unemployment was high in the UK, but it was high elsewhere as well. But he will remember that part of his government's response to that was austerity. And does he want to reflect on the impact of that on our young people?
The honourable gentleman makes a very fair and reasonable point. The point to reflect on, though, is if he goes back and looks through the data of that last quasi-socialist government, youth unemployment stayed stubbornly high throughout, and actually it wasn't just the 2008 crash. The truth was, throughout that period, we had a much higher level of youth unemployment than we should have done. And of course, this austerity, the government overspent. We inherited that massive deficit and we slowly brought it down through the 2010s, but we overspent each and every year. So this myth of austerity, if that means living within your means, well, we didn't live within our means. We overspent each and every year, but by the time we got to COVID, we'd managed to get that right down because we show fiscal responsibility, because we know that if you spend money you don't generate today, you impose the burden on the very young people we're now imposing unemployment upon. So just to deal with the minimum wage, and members opposite touched on it, or do we want to face young people and say they're not worth these higher pay? Well, if they don't have the experience, and if they lose out on getting a job in the first place against an older person because they haven't got even cost competitiveness to use it, they are in trouble. So since its introduction in 1998, there has been a development rate, a lower wage for younger workers. Deliberate. It's for a very sensible reason. When young people enter the workplace, they're doing exactly that. They're developing skills, confidence, discipline, and the ability to work productively alongside more experienced colleagues. And employers were explicitly permitted to pay less in order to reflect an economic reality. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't doubt the good intentions of the party opposite of its cabinet, and indeed of the honourable lady who I may let come in and intervene on me in a moment. But good intentions don't disguise the truth, because they haven't run businesses, and it shows. They don't understand how employers make decisions on how behaviour is incentivised. By abolishing the development rate, the Chancellor wanted to signal that she's on the side of young people. Well, put us in a political divide. You Tories, you don't want to pay young people a fair and decent wage. Well, of course we do, but we want them to have a job. The insider-outsider issue that my right honourable friend touched on earlier. The effect that the Chancellor has had is the opposite of that which she's desired. She's not helping young people. Many have received a short-term pay rise, but hundreds of thousands have received the ultimate kick in the teeth. Not a pay cut, Madam Deputy Speaker, but no pay at all, because the job they should have been offered has disappeared in a puff of the Chancellor's smoke. After the first budget, a survey by the Beverley Chamber of Trade found that 88% of their members said they would be less likely to employ young people because of the rise in the minimum wage. Despite that warning, the Chancellor returned with a second budget and destroyed even more opportunities with another £26 billion tax raid. Madam Deputy Speaker, we can but pray that she is out of the door before she completes her tax-taking trilogy. If the Chancellor changes nothing, we need to change the Chancellor. But what would the Conservatives do differently, Madam Deputy Speaker? Well, we'd start with a simple truth. Employers create jobs, not ministers, not schemes, not programmes. Employers, private employers, they're the ones that generate the wealth. The ladder of opportunity isn't built by ministerial good intentions. It's built by creating incentives for the behaviours you want. And the behaviour you want from employers is to take the risk, to feel it's worth their while for their family to invest in and give an opportunity to a young person. But under this government, the first rung of the ladder is being sawn off. Young people don't begin at the top. They begin with their Saturday job, their summer shift, their first payslip. That's where confidence is built, habits are formed, and futures are forged. When those jobs disappear, the ladder doesn't get longer, it just gets shorter and steeper. Under a Conservative government, we will abolish business rates for retail, hospitality and leisure. Not 10% of them, 100% of them. The very sectors where so many young people take their first step. Cutting costs give businesses the freedom to grow and hire. And you don't need a vast bureaucratic number of people to administer a scheme when you simply lower the costs for employers. They get on with it. That will create real opportunities for young people to learn, earn and prove themselves. Under Labour, businesses face another 3 years of higher and higher costs, heavier regulation and constant uncertainty, leaving young people blocked, frustrated and struggling to get a foothold in the job market. So that's why we will repeal Labour's job-destroying Employment Rights Act, because you cannot regulate your way to prosperity. That Act introduced 28, count them, major reforms, placing significant new requirements on businesses. £5 billion in costs by the government's own estimate. Perhaps the most damaging to young people is the planned changes to zero-hours contracts, requiring guaranteed hours and compensation for cancelled shifts. While well-intentioned, and I fully accept that, these measures reduce the flexibility that both employers and young people value, so as they can balance their studies with gaining experience. Businesses will hire fewer young workers, leaving a generation without the chance to learn, earn and prove themselves. And if we see the youth unemployment rate continue to go up, as it did under the previous Labour governments, from the 14% inherited from the Conservatives to 20%, I hope the Honourable Lady will say now on the floor of the House that if that were to be the terrible outcome and the scarring impact on young people, she would not seek to stand for the Labour Party, because she would recognise at the next election that she'd failed us. I give way to the Honourable Lady.
And I thank the honourable member for giving way. As an ex-employment lawyer and in fact a partner in a law firm that employed 50 people, an equity partner, so I do have some experience. I remember 1998 when the minimum wage came in for over 18s, the same figure for over 18s, and I remember the Conservative Party changing that. So if you were under 25, you were paid less. Your rent doesn't cost less when you're 24. There is still that differential now for under 21s of £2 an hour. It still exists. So how can you say that that differential is no longer there? Because it still is even now.
The Honourable Lady is quite right to mention what we're talking about here is balance. None of us, we're not talking about total employer free-for-all on the one side. What you're looking at is getting that balance, and it looks as if that balance has gone wrong. The Honourable Lady must know this. She can't be. What have been the great external economic shocks over the last year and a half? They haven't really been there. There's no reason other than the policies of this government that have led to this increase in youth unemployment, the loss of nearly 100,000 jobs in hospitality. It is about getting the balance right, and this government has not done it. What the Conservatives will do is align incentives, cut costs and free businesses to hire. Get the balance right. And in doing so, we will give businesses the freedom to take a chance, give young people the chance to prove themselves, because a Conservative government stands for work, not welfare, for opportunity, not dependency.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As we have heard, the number of young people who are not in education, employment or training is at its highest level for more than a decade. Astonishingly, the most recent figures show that 946,000 young people are in that position. That is almost 1 in every 8 young people across the country. We can all agree that that situation is completely unsustainable and is damaging to our society. But despite the promises, the government's actions have only made it harder for young people to find jobs. To the surprise of no one, apart from the Chancellor and her backbenchers, increasing the cost of employment through the rise in national insurance has led to more unemployment. Last month, we saw the biggest monthly fall in payroll employees since the pandemic, and the unemployment rate across the United Kingdom is at 5.1%. So what's Labour's response? They just keep increasing benefits. Welfare spending will rise £18 billion this year and is on track to increase by another £73 billion over the next 5 years. And the biggest driver of that increase is spending on working-age adults. New claimants for personal independent payments are 78% higher than pre-pandemic levels. And of that, 110,000 graduates under the age of 30 and now claim at least one benefit without being in work. Why would a young person today take on the risk of their idea and start a business or put hours of effort into a job when they see more and more of their peers getting by on government handouts? I come to this issue with a very simple belief. The best form of welfare is a well-paid job, and that must be our guiding principle as a country. I will give way.
Can I tempt him with a very simple belief? And that is, unemployment is like any other commodity. The more you pay for it, the more you will have of it.
The honourable member makes an incredible point, and that is precisely what businesses tell me. As I said, it's come to no surprise of none of my constituents and none of my businesses in my constituency of Broxbourne, apart from the Chancellor and the Labour Party, that if you tax jobs more, there will be less jobs for people to go to. And that we have been making that point on this side, and I'm always surprised that when we hear from government MPs and Labour MPs, when they come out and they say, well, we've spoken to businesses in my constituency and everything seems fine. I mean, just speak to businesses with a Conservative MP, they give you a completely different message. More people in decent, sustainable employment and a life of benefits is better for our economy and our public finances. To show young people there can be a better future, we must change the economic model to properly reward employment and change our education system so that young people are prepared for the world of work. As I've said before in this place, we should be more creative about what we're asking young people to learn at school. Countless employers in my constituency have told me that when they hire school leavers, they lack important skills such as writing an email, speaking with customers over the phone, understanding basic finance and understanding the language of contracts. It's not that young people today can't or won't develop these skills, nor that it's the fault of our brilliant teachers. The curriculum just simply isn't geared to preparing young people for the world of work in the modern world. That is why we should be inviting local businesses, entrepreneurs and employers into schools more regularly so they can share their knowledge and experience, to encourage students to think about how they can get their ideas off the ground and what it takes to run a viable business. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I was told when I asked a question in this place by a government minister from the dispatch box that it is government that creates economic growth in this country. Now, let me just say gently to the government, it is not the government, it is not us as MPs that create economic growth within this country. It is all of our constituents out there across the United Kingdom that put a risk, take their ideas forward, create those jobs and create that economic growth locally and in course, employ lots of people. You could learn in school about marketing, economics, maths and law, all without knowing you're actually learning these skills and all without a textbook in sight. That sort of system would help our young people navigate the crucial period after leaving school and make them more attractive to employers. And I've seen the fantastic work at the Broxbourne School, which teach T-levels, a business T-level, where they actually go out into the world of work, have an apprenticeship alongside learning in the classroom. That is what we need to gear our education system towards, preparing young people better for the world of work that we now see in the 21st century. And I've heard a number of speakers from the government side, and I'd just like to say that I was educated and went through my whole education in the United Kingdom under New Labour and under Tony Blair. And I remember Tony Blair saying that he wanted half of all young people to go to university. Now, university might be the right choice for some young people in this country. It's not the right choice for everybody. And when I was at school picking my choices about what I would do after school, the word apprenticeship wasn't even in the school's vocabulary. There was no offer of apprenticeship. You essentially went to university or you fell off an edge of a cliff and you did nothing. Now, that is not a record that I would be proud of after when New Labour was in power last time. So I think they need to reflect on what they did last time in government, because it clearly didn't work then and it's not going to work now. I will give way.
Honourable gentleman must be really pleased about what the Prime Minister has said about the new target of 2/3 of young people being in either higher education or apprenticeships and training.
Of course I'm pleased about that target. Anyone can come to this house and stand at that dispatch box and make a target and make it sound good, but we want action on the ground. The government has been in power now for 18 months, and when I speak to my constituents, we don't see action. When I speak to young people in my constituency, we don't see action. We need to move faster and further on this. I will give way one more time. Go.
The Honourable gentleman would also be very pleased to see the further education white paper as well, which will put some of those things into action.
Look, I'd gently just say to the honourable lady, you had 13 years to come up with a plan for government when you were in opposition. That paper should have landed the day after the general election. You should be getting on with it, not 18 months down the line. My message to the government is clear. Yes, make the obvious changes to the tax that businesses from all of our constituencies are crying out for, but also show you're really serious about creating economic growth, tackling youth unemployment and bring forward fundamental changes to education in this country.
Speaker. Now, I turn 40 next week, so I do hope that doesn't render me too old to highlight the realities faced by some of our young people. They feel let down. Some even speak of intergenerational unfairness. And the facts are stark. Youth unemployment is rising, home ownership feels out of reach, NEET levels are at unprecedented highs, and youth savings are almost non-existent. By any serious measure, being a young person in Britain today is getting harder and harder. It is therefore no surprise that since the general election, support for the party opposite amongst 18 to 24-year-olds has halved. The government simply doesn't understand aspiration, personal freedoms, and it doesn't understand opportunity. Young people in mid-Leicestershire and indeed across the country are increasingly starting to realise this. We on these benches understand that promoting aspiration, freedom and opportunity is the best path out of poverty and improving social mobility, indeed getting on in life. Put simply, we must help our young people to help themselves. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is a shocking indictment that this government's economic policies, such as the rise in national insurance, the burdensome regulations of the Employment Rights Act, and the utter decimation of our hospitality sector, that youth unemployment now stands at above 700,000, with NEETs close to 1 million. Even our brightest graduates are struggling to find work. Now, this is really unsettling for young people, and it is holding back their potential. Honourable members should not just take my word for it. Earlier this week, I hosted the Institute for Hospitality here in Parliament, and delegates told me that the sector has lost over 100,000 jobs, many of which were traditionally taken up by young people at the very start of their careers. So I asked the House, what message does this send to young people of this country? We should be offering them opportunities, not giving them their P45s. This is a betrayal of the next generation, because young people do not want a life on handouts, they want a chance to stand on their own 2 feet. Madam Deputy Speaker, sadly, personal responsibility means very little to this government. Surely it is the government's duty to send a positive message to our young people that through hard work, through determination, through responsibility, you can achieve economic freedoms and success. You can own your own home. You can have that nice car, and you can take those family holidays. You can build a life that you want to create for your own graft and that you and your family can be proud of. and it is increasingly clear that it is only us on these Conservative benches that understand this. We are on the side of hard-pressed taxpayers. I'll give way to my friend.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and he doesn't look a day older than 30, so it can't be his 40th. It can't be his 40th birthday coming up. Does he agree with me that we need to go further than that? Of course, we need economic growth in this country, and we need to tax jobs less and let the people outside create that economic growth. But we also need to look at the education system so that we prepare young people when they leave education better for the world of work that employers are crying out for.
And I absolutely agree with him. One of the campaigns that I've also been articulating is about financial education, because I think that's also key to unlocking the opportunity for many of our young people as well. But as I was saying, many on these, only us on this side of the House believes in young people. We are on the side of hard-pressed taxpayers. We are on the side of small businesses, and now more than ever, we are on the side of young people. I am a Conservative because I believe that economic freedom comes through hard work.
Shadow Minister Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I think this has been a really excellent and engaging debate where I think everyone on all sides of the House has recognised this is an important issue we should be dedicating time to. And indeed it is a crisis because youth unemployment is rising faster here in the UK than anywhere else in the G7. And we've had some fantastic contributions from these benches. We've had my right honourable friend, the member for East Hampshire, who, as a former employment minister, I think spoke in an extremely well-informed way, but also had some very practical things which he incorporated into a call to action. We had a passionate speech from the member for Beaconsfield talking specifically about the greyhound as an exemplary business in her constituency. The member for Bromsgrove, I think, made a very apposite comment about the best welfare programme for young people is a job. And in an outstanding speech, the member for Leicester East shared her deep experience of working in a family business and how important it is that in our retail and hospitality sector, those jobs exist to teach young people reliability, communication and resilience. I would love to.
I'm extremely grateful to my right honourable friend. And while she's picking out remarkable contributions to this debate, although he's not in his seat, was she particularly struck by the member for North Norfolk saying that the Conservatives should apologise for not having in their motion any mention of transport to help young people get to work, when the much longer Liberal Democrat motion, ironically, has no mention of transport either.
I think my right honourable friend makes an excellent point, and indeed my honourable friend from Herne Bay and Sandwich, I think, spoke extremely eloquently about the importance of the dog and duck in his constituency, but also how terrible it is for the local community that it has closed because of all the extra costs. My right honourable friend in his contribution from Beverley and Holderness was absolutely on the nail in terms of some of the statistics and the fact that we've seen this film before. We have learnt about the importance of the ladder of opportunity that is built by good intentions, and that you need to create those jobs in the private sector. You can't regulate your way to prosperity. And my honourable friend, the member for Broxbourne, in a speech which I thought was very practical and befits his background in both the private sector and in local government, had some very sensible points to make. Is that my honourable friend asking for me to give way? I give way. Yeah.
I find it striking during the Minister opposite speech that she seemed to be lauding jobs created by the government. Does my right honourable friend agree that it's ridiculous to suggest that the government should create jobs instead of business?
My honourable friend is spot on, because it is that foundation of private sector prosperity that will create the tax revenues that we can use to pay for excellent public services. And I think that was a point that my honourable friend from Mid-Leicestershire, who I agree the House is shocked to learn that he will be 40 next week, made a similar point, which I thought illustrated the importance of business and of the private sector. And at times, Madam Deputy Speaker, I felt, and I hope you'll permit this in the chair, a quote from Mark Twain came to mind about lies, damn lies and statistics. And I'm using it as a quote, Madam Deputy Speaker, to summarise what I think was some of the contributions. So I want to just sort of set out for the record what I see as the statistics that I'm afraid as facts are a matter of record, that youth unemployment is now at 15.9%. It is a rise of 2.5% on this government's watch. And we've heard from a range of contributions, 729,000 young people are unemployed in this country, and that is a scandalous 103,000 more than the previous year. And that number doesn't even include those who were signed off as long-term sick. Indeed, there are nearly 1 million young people who are not in education, employment or training, and that is up 25,000 since this government came to power. Many of them are university graduates. The Centre for Social Justice has warned that over 700,000 university graduates are now out of work and on benefits. And many are fleeing the country, looking for opportunity elsewhere. We saw last year... Can I just finish my sentence? I'll give way to my honourable friend. Last year, there was net emigration of 59,000 young people under the age of 24 from this country. I give way.
Proportion of benefits claimants that are under age 24. In Sleaford North Highcombe, the number of people on unemployment benefit under the age of 24 is 25% of the total, which is clearly a very large amount.
And I think, as we've seen so often in this debate, it is a tragedy, and that every young person deserves that chance to move into the world of work. And I think what we're seeing from these statistics, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that this is not a blip. It's a trend, and it's a trend that's moving in the wrong direction. I would love to.
I'm extremely grateful. Does she look forward to the Minister's reply, as I do, in a moment? Because youth unemployment has gone up from 14% to 16% already. Does she want to hear from the Minister at the dispatch box a commitment that he will ensure that this government reduces it back down so that they can, for once, end their time in power in 2029, however short-lived they may be in power, they may end it with a lower rate of youth unemployment than they started?
I certainly hope that we'll hear a plan of action to tackle this alarming crisis, and I certainly hope that we'll see a less selective grouping of statistics than we did from the Minister when she opened the debate. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government has made it more expensive, it's made it more burdensome, it's made it more risky for businesses to hire young people. And this is not a view that I'm expressing from a partisan point of view. I'm going to try and follow the example of the member for Harlow. I'm going to try not to be partisan by quoting from external organisations here. The Federation of Small Business, for example, it warns that many firms are now scaling back recruitment, with young workers the most exposed. The highly respected Neutral Institute for Fiscal Studies has warned of a worrying rise in unemployment among young workers, citing policy-driven increases in labour costs. And the National Institute of Economic and Social Research has highlighted a cooling labour market with disproportionate effects on young people. So, how has the government managed to have such a terrible impact on our young people in its first 18 months? First of all, there is the national insurance rise. The Institute of Directors has described the national insurance rises as a direct disincentive to hiring. Because young people are the least experienced, the least established and the most vulnerable to cost cutting, when you make it more expensive to hire, employers hire fewer people. It is not complicated. Second, we have Labour's minimum wage increase. Now, since the 2024 general election, the cost of hiring a full-time minimum wage worker has risen sharply across every age group. For over 21s, the annual cost has increased by 15%, but for 18 to 20-year-olds, it has jumped by 26%, despite the fact that there is no employer national insurance to pay for that age group. And for apprentices, it has risen by 25%. In fact, since Labour got into government, it now costs £4,000 more a year to hire an 18-year-old full-time. So I give way to a member from the governing party.
Proud to be a member from the governing party, and I do thank you for giving way. Of course, I'm sure she wouldn't be telling those young people in her constituency that they don't deserve that pay rise, particularly when what this is about is making sure two people side by side doing the same job to the same standard should get the same pay, irrespective of their age. Surely that's a good thing.
I'm very sad to see that the honourable gentleman does not recognise that that young person can now be standing next to another young person who is unable to get a job. And surely he must agree that the level at which people are being paid has had an effect on the fact that there are fewer people in these jobs. The Federation of Small Businesses has said that these rises, well, they don't have to listen to me. They can listen to the Federation of Small Businesses again, Madam Speaker, and then I'll give way again. These rises risk pricing young people out of the labour market. That's not me speaking, that's the Federation of Small Businesses, and I'm sure the honourable gentleman will agree with them.
Yeah, Madam Richie, and I think the Federation of Small Business will, of course, be looking for answers to those policy challenges that they are rightly putting back to this place. So what would her answer to them be in terms of how much they should reduce how much they pay young people by in order to make that balance that so many members opposite have talked about this afternoon? By how much does she think the minimum wage should be reduced for young people so they can be guaranteed that job?
I've got perhaps some news that's a bit of a shock to the honourable gentleman, which is that it's his party that's in power. It should be his front bench that he's having this conversation with, and his Chancellor, because labour market economists at the Resolution Foundation have noted. The Resolution Foundation, by the way, not normally considered to be right-leaning, they've noted that when minimum wages rise faster than productivity, employers tend to favour experienced workers, disadvantaging young applicants. So the very people that Labour claims to champion are the ones being priced out of the labour market. The third thing, Madam Deputy Speaker, that Labour's business rates reforms have also piled pressure on our high streets. Hospitality, retail, small firms, these, as we've heard time and time again through this debate, are the very sectors that traditionally give young people their first job. Indeed, my own first job was behind the bar at a now defunct pub. And it taught me an enormous amount, and I was very grateful for the opportunity. And indeed, the Confederation of British Industry has said that rising business rates suppress investment and hiring. When you increase fixed costs for employers, you reduce their capacity to hire. And then lastly, Madam Deputy Speaker, but perhaps the most damaging of all, is Labour's Employment Rights Act. It introduces sweeping day one rights across the board. And the government's own economic analysis of the bill says higher labour costs could reduce demand for work, damaging the employment prospects of the same workers the package is trying to support. The risks are highest for workers with the weakest attachment to the labour market and the youngest workers, since they are still gaining skills and experience. This is not a partisan point. This is the government's own impact assessment of their own legislation. Indeed, the Youth Future Foundation has said the risk profile of recruiting young people has increased. And the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development reports that employers are already reducing recruitment plans, particularly for inexperienced workers, due to regulatory uncertainty. So for large firms, I will give way to my honourable friend.
An excellent speech, and I'm sorry to interrupt it, but I wanted to ask her about those people who are writing hundreds and hundreds of applications for graduate schemes and who are finding they're locked out of graduate schemes because they're being deprioritised because of the colour of their skin. Why should the Deputy Prime Minister's son or the children of our leader Kemi Badenoch, the honourable member for Saffron Walden, why should they be deprioritised why should they be prioritised for jobs over the tractor driver from Lincolnshire?
Well, she makes a very, very good point. And I would make the point, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the third-party testimony that I have been giving shows that for large firms, the legislation is a headache. For small firms, the legislation is a deterrent to employment. And for young people in our country, it is a disaster. Because when employers are forced to choose between hiring an experienced worker or taking a chance on an 18-year-old with no track record, the government has made that choice brutally simple. And the result is fewer opportunities, fewer first jobs, a generation shut out before they've even begun. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Labour government's policies are not pro-worker. They are anti-opportunity. They are killing youth employment with higher taxes, higher costs, higher risks for employers. And young people deserve better. They deserve a government that understands how jobs are created, how businesses operate, how opportunity is built. They deserve a government that will not price them out of the labour market. They deserve a government prepared to reform the welfare system so they do not become trapped in welfare benefits dependency. We, on this side of the House, we Conservatives, will stand up for those young people. We will abolish business rates for retail, hospitality and leisure. This will benefit 250,000 businesses and revive our high streets. We will break Labour's doom loop with our golden economic rule and save £47 billion. We will abolish stamp duty. We will introduce a £5,000 first jobs bonus, backing the next generation, and we will repeal every job-destroying, anti-business, anti-growth measure in the Employment Rights Act. We will double apprenticeship funding by ending debt-trap university degrees. We'll overhaul the sickness and disability benefit system. We will hold this government to account, and we will fight for a jobs market that gives every young person the chance to succeed.
Minister Andrew Weston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And if only the party opposite had had 14 years to do much of what the opposition spokesperson has just outlined. But it seems that the party opposite never tire of pulling apart their own abysmal record. Because today they have chosen to focus on the crisis of opportunity that they handed down to young people and which this government is determined to address. They were perfectly happy, it seems, for youth apprenticeship starts to plummet by nearly 40%. They sat and watched as the number of young people neither learning nor earning spiralled upwards by 300,000 in 3 years. And they were devoid of ideas to help young people overcome the barriers to work that they face. But perhaps worst of all, Madam Deputy Speaker, when confronted with the undeniable proof of their failure, they blamed young people instead of supporting them. This government will never treat the next generation with such an attitude, which was at best ambivalence and at worst contempt. Instead, we are clearing up the mess the previous government left in its wake, giving young people the opportunities to succeed and the support they need. And we are determined, not at the moment, and we are determined to deliver this on the huge scale required to meet the size of the challenge we inherited. That is why we are refocusing apprenticeships towards young people, and we're also bringing support to where they are by expanding youth hubs to over 360 areas across Great Britain. This is just one part of our youth guarantee, Madam Deputy Speaker, which we're rolling out so every young person gets the chance to earn or learn as part of the more than £1.5 billion made available for employment and skills support at the budget, creating around 355,000 new training or workplace opportunities. This includes a jobs guarantee with subsidised paid employment for around 55,000 young people. These are significant interventions, Madam Deputy Speaker, while the party opposite offer nothing. The vision they have not at the moment. The vision they have to offer young people is as bleak as the reality of their record. Low-paid, insecure work and a cold shoulder instead of a helping hand. We have seen where that leads, and we have chosen a different path. I will.
Well, to the Minister for giving way. He knows that youth unemployment was at 20% when we came to power, and it was down to 14% when we left power. Can he commit that his government, with this vast array of programmes, will bring youth unemployment back below the level that his government inherited? Because previous Labour governments have failed in that respect. They've shoved up youth unemployment with all the damage that goes with that. Can he commit today that his government will ensure that that number comes down, and if they don't, put their hands up and admit their failure?
Yes. Well, that is why we are making the interventions that we are, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the form of the Youth Guarantee, the increased investment in the Growth and Skills Levy. But I would just gently say to him that he will be aware that the rate of youth unemployment rose by 4% in their last 2 years in office and was rising at the point when they left office. And we have heard today excuse after excuse, attack after attack from the party opposite on the fact that youth unemployment is rising, when it was rising when they left office. This is not a new problem. It is a significant challenge, one that we are serious about addressing. But if the party opposite wish to continue with their policy of collective amnesia on the mess they left, they will never have anything to offer young people. And so, turning, Madam Deputy Speaker, to some of the specific contributions of members opposite, and beginning with the Shadow Secretary of State, who showed that the Conservative Party has suddenly developed empathy for young people after a period in office in which they left us with a neat number of almost 1 million. They compared the youth unemployment rate with other G7 countries when we have the second highest youth employment rate in the G7. Now, we are not complacent. We know that there is work to do. I am aware that it is a different figure, but it is relevant when looking at the overall picture, as the Right Honourable Gentleman is fully aware. We heard, of course, of the fact from several members, but first by the Shadow Secretary of State, that nobody on the front bench had ever worked in a business. I suggest that she checks the record, but certainly both myself and my right honourable friend who opened the debate worked for many years in the private sector. I managed a small business, I worked in a global business, and I did several other jobs in the private sector in between. The suggestion, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the party opposite cut the welfare bill, halved unemployment, it's like a pick and mix of flattering figures from various moments of their time in office. But we, like people up and down this country, will judge them on the legacy that they left at the point in which they left office. A spiralling welfare bill that disincentivised those people from looking for work, and the only G7 country with a lower employment rate than before the pandemic. They are not prepared to face up to the mess that they left our country in, and they do this time and again, and I admire their chutzpah for continuing to table issues for Opposition Day debates on which their own record is absolutely appalling and is by a considerable margin, the most significant factor in what we face today. But that does not mean that the public will forgive or forget what they left behind. Turning to the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, and she asked in particular about the impact of AI on the work workforce. And I just want to assure her that the government is cognisant of that, very mindful of the need to keep a close eye on this, and have recently stood up a new cross-government unit that will specifically look at the AI impacts on the labour market, as well as offering free AI foundations training for all workers. She raised some concerns about the defunding of Level 7 apprenticeships. And look, I'm not going to pretend, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this is not a difficult decision that the government has made, but we have chosen to target the apprenticeship funding that this government has to spend on young people, because they are less likely to have a relationship with an employer who might be able to fund their training. They are less likely to be able to access some of the other opportunities that people who are perhaps accessing higher level apprenticeships have. And of course there are other routes, including a more traditional higher education route for people to access instead of a Level 7 apprenticeship. She asked specifically about the timing for the rollout of the Youth Guarantee. The first tranche of that will be in place from April, the first 55,000 opportunities, but by September we will see the rollout of the full 300,000. She went on, Madam Deputy Speaker, to criticise the national insurance increase in the budget and the impact that that has had, but then set out that the Liberal Democrats would cut business rates, cut VAT and scrap that national insurance contribution increase. And I have to say gently to the Honourable Lady that this is the problem with the Liberal Democrat position. They never say how they would pay for it. They never say what they would do. She lambasts the decisions of the first Labour budget. Would they choose to withdraw the money that has gone in additionally to the NHS? It is not a credible position to only set out what you are against. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, we did hear a number of excellent contributions from my right honourable friends for Norwich North, Welwyn, Hatfield, Gillingham and Rainham, Harlow and Banbury. They were excellent contributions that not only highlighted the toxic legacy of the party opposite, but set out the range of key interventions that this government is making, including, but of course not limited to, the Youth Guarantee. The right honourable gentleman from East Hampshire, I think, asked a question on the timing of Connect to Work, but I may have lost track. It was certainly.
He projects on Connect to Work by the end of this financial year, which is the first year in which it operates.
Can I thank him for that clarity? So he will be aware that Connect to Work is already live in 2/3 of delivery areas. By April, that will be all areas. In his area of East Hampshire, we expect that that will support up to 4,800 people and is already live. In the round with the £18.7 million, but I will confirm for him separately the figure for this financial year, but that is the aspiration in the round with the funding that has been made available there. He then launched a staunch defence of 0 hours contracts. He will know that we have a fundamentally different view of that. It is my view that insecure work is a blight. Not knowing what hours you have to work each week is hugely problematic for those on challenging budgets, and it is just a fundamentally different perspective that we have on this side of the House. Yeah.
That principle to bank staff working in the National Health Service who have what is in fact a 0 hours contract, a bank staff contract, in order to top up in other roles in the NHS when that support is needed?
Well, I think the challenge in the NHS is markedly different, and I would freely acknowledge that. But the right honourable gentleman is talking about other roles in the NHS because it's not unusual for people to be holding more than one job if they are operating as bank staff, so they don't have the uncertainty about receiving any funding at all. The other question that the right honourable gentleman had, I think, was a criticism that the youth guarantee or the jobs guarantee only kicks in after 18 months. That is the final stage of a range of new interventions that this government is putting in place, including an additional supported conversation at 13 weeks, followed by 4 weeks of intensive work coach support with specialist teams. So it is not just the jobs guarantee after 18 months, but a broad range of interventions that are being put in place. The Honourable Lady for Beaconsfield, I don't think is in her place, but she said that apprenticeships were an opportunity for young people to find work, and I quite agree with her. But the reforms of the party opposite had the effect of delivering a situation where, as the Liberal Democrat spokesperson said, the average age of those entering into apprenticeships was significantly increased, and we are seeking to reverse that trend. It's important that we do so. It is a key mechanism for giving young people the skills that they will need in the future. I believe she also called this a youth unemployment crisis of this government's making, which I fail to see can possibly be the case when there was such a stark increase in the final 2 years of the party opposite in the youth unemployment figures. The honourable gentleman from Bromsgrove said that the welfare support is the best welfare support of all is a job, and so he will be delighted to see the additional 513,000 people that have entered into employment over the past 12 months. And the honourable lady for Leicester East, also not here, I think, said that she was tired of hearing about this government's ambition. But the party opposite had a paucity of just that, not at the moment. Because they left almost 1 million NEETs, a welfare system that disincentivised work, something we've begun to address, and an employment rate lower than before the pandemic. They can accuse us of being too ambitious if they like, Madam Deputy Speaker. They had given up on delivering opportunity for our young people, something that this government will never do. The honourable gentleman from Beverley and Holderness, right honourable gentleman, possibly, my apologies, asked, how do we encourage an employer to take a chance on a young person? By not charging national insurance contributions for under-21s or for apprentices under 25, by fully funding apprentices at SMEs, by placing young people in 6 months of guaranteed work if they are out of the workforce for 18 months, so that they have the chance to prove themselves. A range of interventions that we are putting in place because we recognise that there is a challenge with youth unemployment. It is long-standing, it is not new, but we take it very seriously. Certainly.
I thank the Minister for allowing. If you take the point that the right honourable gentleman made, the natural extrapolation to what I believe the Conservatives are suggesting is the way you can incentivise that employer is by allowing them to pay less than the minimum wage, or indeed cut the minimum wage rate for young people, which I would oppose. Would the Minister?
I certainly would, and I note that the opposition spokesperson in her closing contribution failed to say, having complained about the increase in the minimum wage, what level the Conservative Party think it is acceptable to reset that at. I personally could not look young people in the eye and justify such a cut to their wages, but the party opposite seem very happy to do so. In continuing her closing contribution, she also pointed to the excuse me, Madam Deputy Speaker, the lack of a plan of action, but this was set out comprehensively by my right honourable friend, the Minister of State for Employment, underpinned by the £1.5 billion for the Youth Guarantee and Growth and Skills Levy funding increase, but not limited to those interventions alone. These attacks on the national minimum wage increase are frankly a smokescreen for a party that has targeted young people with their policies for 14 years and would very clearly continue to do so now. The honourable gentleman from Mid-Leicestershire, I can't resist, Madam Deputy Speaker, commenting on the fact that I would have felt it was more likely to have him in the young people category than in the 40-plus category. But I note that he himself has had a change of employment status, Madam Deputy Speaker, because he was indeed on the front bench on Monday and has now returned to his previous position in the PPS pigeonhole. So it's a thriving labour market on the Conservative benches, if nowhere else. But he pointed to youth unemployment rising, home ownership falling and NEETs on the up. That is a brave take, Madam Deputy Speaker, when every single one of those facts was true in July 2024. He then asked, and again, daring, but he is an honourable gentleman who I know is certainly daring, if nothing else, what this had done to our the voting intentions of young people where the Labour Party were concerned. I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that if I was a Conservative member of this place, and I have no intention of being, I don't know how much longer he intends to be one, I would not be pointing to any other party's polling amongst 18 to 24-year-olds, because theirs is truly dire because of the appalling legacy that they left behind. Certainly.
Yeah. Thank you. Speaking of daring, the leader of the opposition today has said, quote, "We don't want any more centrist ideas in the Conservative Party." What does the Minister make of that in terms of their future with young people?
I would say to my honourable friend that if that is the position of the Leader of the Opposition, Conservative members may need to find a new home other than reform. But I think the issue here, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that we are dealing with a significant... I'm not sure where that came from, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I think it is for somebody who knows a little bit about political journeys himself, and he will allow me to simply leave it there. But I am concerned, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've heard a lot today, as I said, about a spiralling welfare bill, about the rise in youth unemployment, but we had an opposition spokesperson closing the debate, refusing, when directly asked, to set out what the party opposite would do. And if this is the best that they can offer on one of the few days throughout the year in which they have control of the order paper, no idea, no clue and no plan, and highlighting multiple problems in our society inherited directly from them, as the facts point to, I think they will be having rather more opposition days before they come back to this side of the House.
The question is that the original words stand part of the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Division. Clear the lobby. The question is that the original words stand part of the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. The tellers for the ayes are Paul Holmes and David Simmons. The tellers for the noes, Deirdre Costigan and Mark Ferguson. Order, order.
The ayes to the right, 91. The noes to the left, 287.
The ayes to the right are 91. The noes to the left, 287. So the noes have it, the noes have it. Unlock. The question is that the proposed words be there added. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. I declare the question as amended to be agreed to.